Good evening, everyone. I declare the meeting open. I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands of the Kabi people, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I note that all councillors are in attendance, and I welcome everyone in the gallery this evening. Can I have a mover for the confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary? Thank you, Councillor Lawrence, and second, Councillor Finzel. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And a mover for the confirmation of the minutes of the special meeting. Thank you, Councillor Walkie. Second, Councillor Finzel. Thank you very much. All in favour? Carried unanimously. There are no mayoral minutes. Item 4, next up is petitions. I have an e-petition with 1,500 signatures submitted by the Eastern Beaches Protection Association regarding their concerns about stormwater and sewage erosion. I move that this petition be received and presented to the CEO for appropriate action. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Finzel. All in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Any further petitions, Councillor?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I have a petition from over 100 residents in Ward Street, TEWANTIN. They're very concerned. They have safety concerns about a car that's been covered and parked and occupying a same parking space in the street for some time. The concern for the safety of passers-by, restriction of vision when reversing cars out, the large amount of motorised scooters, children on bikes and pedestrians. There's also a disabled child living three doors up with a bus collecting her on Monday and Friday to take her to school. Garbage trucks also struggle to turn in the turning bay allocated. They would like Noosa Council to consider lengthening the yellow line to include the front of 6 Ward Street to a no standing zone, as this one car space is monopolised by the same car and it will not be missed if it becomes a no standing zone. I'd like to submit this petition to the CEO for appropriate action.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just clarify that the resolution in front of us, which refers to 51 people, as opposed to what Councillor Wilkie alluded to, over 100 people, that we can clarify for the purposes of accuracy of recording of the minutes, please?
Thank you.
I counted them. It was over 100, and I've just been confirmed it was.
So if we sign by over 100 people, there are 100. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we should be precise in the number, but anyway, we can clarify the number.
Yeah.
I'll second that petition.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll just change that to 100.
By over, Alinda? Sorry. So, Councillor Wilkie, I've seconded it.
Yep.
All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We have one notified motion from Councillor Stockwell. Councillor Stockwell.
Yes, Councillor. So, this notified motion came about after one of the many discussions I've had with community members where they asked me a simple question, and that made me reflect. And the reflection was that, does the Noosa plan reflect the desired future for this area, or does it simply reflect the current development approval? And to me, I thought the latter. And while we can't prejudge the outcome of the current application to extend that development approval, we can make sure that the planning scheme reflects the public interest and the community aspirations for their own localities. Hence, I've suggested in this motion that we consider, and it's important to record, it is only asking to consider a range of changes, a couple of changes it is, to the planning scheme, and to request the CEO bring forward a further report as part of the current planning scheme review. So the outcome is that this issue would then form part of a report to Council about potential scheme amendments, which we know is coming to Council in the near future. But why is this important? Why does it warrant this urgent action? The community has a great interest, and that interest has been growing since the time that the development approval has been in place, since the time that the planning scheme first identified it for its current purpose. And that concerns largely around the habitat that's there. Initially, the development approval that's over the site did have community input, but that is well over a decade ago. And there's been a large turnover.
Excuse me.
Sorry, I'll second the motion.
Sorry, we started.
I was just about to ask the same question on whether it had been seconded and Council was talking about.
Sorry, interrupt.
That's okay. It's better when it's seconded.
You're too quick.
It's a lot of waffle otherwise.
Yeah, so there's been a huge turnover in the community since last the future of that site was open to public comment. There's a growing concern about the glossy black cockatoo, which is listed as vulnerable under the Nature Conservation Act and has also been put up for a listing under the Environment Protection Biodiversity Act of Australia. And that is a result of the threatening processes which include fire, climate change and habitat loss that results in what has been recorded as an alarming species decline nationally. There's also been, since 2019 and 20, the local community has reasonably had heightened concerns about bushfire hazards and the prediction that there'll be more extreme bushfires, and this site is immediately adjacent to the Noosa National Park. So what else has changed? Why else would we consider changing the planning scheme? So when it was first proposed for the current use, there was no state level significance mapped, and now there is. In 2000, it is now mapped as essential habitat, and our new scheme does, in the biodiversity overlay, record that as having a matter of state environmental significance. And that's because the Banksia Mulia wetland, the SARE, is currently mapped from a vegetation management perspective as of concern, but from its biodiversity status as endangered. So these are matters that generally in the Noosa plan you would be requiring a higher level of assessment for any development application. Quite specifically, we now know that there are 71 identified feed trees for the glossy black on Lot 9 that still remains uncleared, and that there's been records of up to 40 birds coming to feed, drink and rear their young in the locality. It's important to say that we've also committed to doing action in our environment strategy when we do have ecosystems like that. So it talks about the environment strategy talks about by 2030 populations of key threat and indicator species remain viable, and the specific action 1.3 says mapped remnant vegetation and important regrowth vegetation is protected through the planning scheme and also through state and Commonwealth legislation. So this motion helps to implement that aspect of the environment strategy. The bushfire hazard and climate preparedness also. The Lot 9 of GRASSTREE Court has got a high bushfire hazard. When we adopted our climate response plan, we also made a commitment that said that we'll be taking measures to have a well-informed and prepared community that considers climate change in making day-to-day and business decisions, and clearly identifies there is an increased risk from bushfires. These are issues that in a good planning you will get an impact assessable application which will be considered against the whole planning scheme and which provides the community that opportunity to have their say. And finally, in the housing needs assessment adopted in Council 2021, it identifies that the SHIRE as being gripped by a housing crisis which is having a significant social and economic impact on the community. We have limited cleared zoned land for community uses which is suitable for social housing. And the other aspect of this motion suggests that we increase the flexibility for the cleared lot, being Lot 6, to allow a range of social housing options on that block to meet that critical need. So the overall aim of this motion is for council to adopt a position, to ask staff to come back that reflects what I believe is the community's aspirations for the future, that they get a larger say. If it stays as a code assessable application, they don't have any formal say. Their desire for involvement in the development application and the current planning need for social housing will be catered for if we do amend the planning scheme in this way. While there are potential sites within the locality to accommodate other new aged care facilities, as is currently proposed, there is very limited supply of glossy black cockatoo habitat, and considering the high conservation value and bushfire hazard ratings of Lot 9 on the south side of the street, it is proposed to schedule that the current scheduled use for retirement facilities be removed. So councillors, I recommend this to you. I believe it is a way that we can provide a clear direction for what this council wants on that side.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion?
I just have a question. Just for clarification, Councillor Stockwell said he was asking the staff for reports. Oh, sorry, forgot it was formal, my apology. To ask the staff for reports to inform the plan. I'm just wondering why it's got remove the listing in the motion.
We might have staff. Do we have Kerry?
Maybe
Oh,
we-
sorry, Councillor Stockwell.
Yeah, it's my motion. So the intent is currently over lot 9, which is the one with the remaining high conservation value. There is a scheduled list for the map which says it's residential care facility. That remains. It means that any future application we receive for a residential care facility would be code accessible and would not have the ability for the community to have any say. By removing it, it doesn't say that they can't have a residential care facility there. They say it has to go through an impact accessible process which allows the community input and which allows council to consider a broader range of aspects of the planning scheme when determining that application.
It might be prudent, Kerry, if you come up to the table, please, after answering questions.
Kim's online as well.
Kim, yeah. Kim, can you hear us?
Yes, I can,
Okay.
Councillor Stewart.
You're right to answer any questions, thank you, Kim.
So I'll ask the question. With regard to the current development application that is approved there, what impact would this have on the current approved development application?
Okay, we do have an application to extend the currency period of the approval for Blue Care, so that's before count with officers, and we're currently undertaking an assessment. The planning act says we're required to assess extensions to currency period against any relevant matter, so it's a fairly broad ranging assessment. Primarily the assessment would be against the current planning scheme because it wasn't in place at the time. The application was lodged and extended in 2017, so that would be very relevant. We would also consider, has anything changed on this site? Has the ecological values changed on the site? Has the bushfire requirements changed? There'd be a range of matters. We can look at what scheme amendments are in place. There's a well-known principle called the CODI principle, which allows us to consider also scheme amendments. But typically, the further progressed a scheme amendment is, the more weight you can place on it. Obviously, this is just a proposed amendment today, so I would suggest only little weight could be placed on it in considering that extension to the currency period.
Thank you, Kim.
Question probably for Councillor Stockwell. Why are you proposing to remove the listing for 3 on lot 9, but retain the listing of 3 for lot 6? How will that change the uses possible on those 2 sites? Why is there seems to be a differential treatment of it.
There is a differential, yeah. So lot 6 is the one that's already been substantially cleared.
Yeah.
And so it's saying that as a cleared block of land zone community facilities, that it is still suitable for residential care facilities. It just proposes to add other uses that may be able to be established there that in terms of social housing, with multiple units. There might be a range of different ways that social housing. So it just allows that if the current development approval falls over, any future applications have a broader range of social outcomes, and with, obviously up to the landowner. But what it says is, in this community at the moment, social housing is a critical priority.
Councillor, question for you, Councillor. Part B, request the CEO to include these matters in a future report to Council on the planning scheme review. So this is not, if we all agree to this isn't set in stone. This is just, will form part of a report that will come back to Council with more detailed analysis. Is that the intention?
It's certainly the forward part will come back. I don't know whether staff will be more detailed than I was.
But it will come back in.
Following on that, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah. Look,
Yes, it would be subject to a future report to Council where we would consider the motion and recommendation and weigh up all the issues and report that back to Council prior to any formal amendment being undertaken.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Kim. I'll speak in favour of the motion. I'm very interested to see what the report will come back with, because the situation pertaining to these two lots has changed dramatically since it was approved by the Sunshine Coast Council back in 2011. There are changes to the biodiversity overlay. This council is facing a housing crisis. We have need to assess choices we make on available land against the need for affordable and social housing. There are changes in bushfire hazard, which I know have been conditioned in the current approvals, but I'd be very interested to see what comes back, and also if there is an opportunity for the changes to provide an opportunity for the community to have a say, making it impact accessible as opposed to a rubber stamp for any approval we may wish to give on the site. I'm approving this because it is an information gathering exercise. There's a lot I would like to understand with the help of the staff's expert advice that comes back in a report, and before we make a final decision on that. So I thank Councillor Stockwell for his work on this. The situation certainly has changed dramatically since 2011. The world's turned. Our community is and community needs are very different now to what they were in 2011.
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I agree. We are fundamentally changed given the impacts of COVID throughout the past 2 years. I do have a question though to Councillor Stockwell, and I thank him for his motion before us today. I'm just wondering why, if it's a report back to this council, why we need the need for 1 and 2 with actual directives to remove the listing and add a range. Why can't we just have a report back from council without the constraints of 1 and 2 as in your motion?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stockwell.
Because I believe that it's appropriate for this council to adopt that as a position to be investigated. I think it's important that we put up the solution, not just ask for a very broad range. And to me, that is a solution that is has planning merit without exposing the council to any adverse effects.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Given I'm not a planner, I'm just wondering how you yourself arrived at the solution.
Thinking about it, I suppose I have the benefit, I have had 30 years experience as a planner, so it just was an outcome that if I thought about it, it was probably something we could have done at the scheme review back in 2 years ago, but at this stage it was, as I said, prompting from community members asking questions about shouldn't it have this and why not this, that I thought, well, if it may be the case in a few months' time we have a blank sheet on that site, what is the outcome that both the council and the community would like? And to me, this is the best way to change the scheme to achieve that.
Through the chair via the CEO, can you please clarify if we need the solution that comes via a councillor, or should that be through the planning staff to give us the solutions to take to the vote?
Through the Mayor in response, Councillor Finzel, thanks for your question. It is totally appropriate for an elected member to be prescriptive in what they put forward for council officers to review. However, it wouldn't inhibit council officers from providing further information that may assist the council in making further decisions. This is calling for a report. It's very prescriptive, and in that report that's being called for, it's fantastic that the council officers can actually be very clear in the advice that we provide back to the whole council table for the decision. It won't preclude council officers though from providing further information. So it is appropriate, and that direction is appreciated.
Thank you. Another question through the chair. Given then that we're here doing this, I'd just like to know how long does the amendment take, and is the amendment that's up for review with the report back to council, is that around the affordable housing review that's going up to state?
If I can just, and staff may wish to comment, that is one thing that I was prescriptive of in terms of item A, where it says consider the following zoning map changes as part of the current suite of planning scheme amendments. So the intent of bringing it forward in this way was to get it fast-tracked into the current suite of planning amendments, and I believe staff may indicate when that they are going to be reported to council, but I think the last advice was quite soon.
Thank you. Kim, can you add anything further on that?
Yes, I can, Councillor Stewart. The current suite of planning scheme amendments are coming to council next month. And we have a workshop with council next week, and then they need to be finished within about a week and a half. So understanding that this motion requests that they be included in the current suite of amendments, if we are to prepare a report investigating these options and come back to council, that may be a little difficult to achieve.
Okay, thank you.
So do I understand from that, Kim, that the intent of this, or the motion in front of us, may not be able to be achieved? That we've left it a little bit too long, too late.
Potentially, we may be able to get a report to the next round of meetings, but at that same round, we are bringing the planning scheme package of amendments to council. So that's probably the best scenario we could achieve, and it would then need to follow council's decision at that time. Like I said, we've been working on this round of amendments now for a number of months, and it is coming to council in the May round of meetings.
Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair. Look, I do have concerns with those constraints, with removing like explicit, action. Can we get the same outcomes to include other things around, community CERN, around assessment of applications based on the 2020 plan as opposed to 2016, without putting actual prescribed things in the motion?
Through the chair, Councillor Finzel, officers aren't concerned, following on from the CEO's comments, officers aren't that concerned about the prescribed solutions in the motion. They provide officers some direction in terms of what council would specifically want us to consider. However, council officers' report will provide all the relevant information around those solutions, but may very well also provide you with other options that officers may consider appropriate or relevant for council.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Anyone else? Joe?
Oh, look, I've got no problem supporting this. The element of being prescriptive is actually beneficial, I think, to staff, because it narrows the scope that they need to address with this. I'll concur with the thoughts of both Councillors Stockwell and Wilkie previously, that this has been a controversial site, a site that was approved under a previous council, and we've had to follow through with. And the world has changed. There is some elements that have changed around this site. That's not to say that development won't go ahead, but in the event that it is challenged in any way, shape or form to proceed, this gives us a raft of options that aren't on the table at the moment to consider as part of planning scheme reviews. The planning scheme review. I know it's a short time frame, but being as prescriptive as it is, I think that actually facilitates the opportunity for staff to look specifically at not only one other element of the reviews that they're currently undertaking, and I'm happy to support it.
I'll support it too. I think the word you use, Councillor Drusovich, is options. For so long we've said that our hands have been tied in regard to this development, and they very much have. This is a small window that gives us some options. It's not making decisions today, it's just getting further information, and I think always having further information, the ability to obtain further reports, and the potential ability to have the community's voice heard, I think is important. So I will support this, noting that it is just bringing a further report to council, but that will guide us, it will provide us with more information and further learnings in regard to this matter. Thank you.
I'll speak to this motion. I'm a little bit challenged by it. I'm going to start with what I like about the motion and what I don't like about the motion. What I like about it, that it's changing the use to community use changes, which means the level of assessments change from code to impact assessment. as articulated tonight, that provides an opportunity for the community to have their say on the future of this lot, and recognises that in the 11 years that this application has been sitting with council, our community has changed. Our community has changed, as has our current and future planning needs. Now I'm going to start with what I don't like about this motion and why I won't be supporting it tonight. It's my opinion that this motion does not represent the voices of the Noosa community that was led by Spencer's petition, which had over 63,000 signatories objecting to the GRASSTREE court development. I won't be supporting this motion because it doesn't acknowledge that Lot 6 and Lot 9 had conservation status and that this needs to be reinstated and honoured. I go back to page 5 of the notified motion, and Councillor Stockwell, you note that Lot 9, the previous ecological assessment of Lot 9 has identified 71 feed trees of the glossy black cockatoos. Quote, there are records of up to 40 birds coming to feed, drink and rear their young in the locality. This to me has critical ecological value. And I think this area should be returned back to the black glossy cockatoos with no conditions. Third reason I'm not supporting this motion is because it doesn't put ecological or environmental needs before economic and social outcomes. I appreciate immensely the intent of this motion, and I fully support low-cost housing for workers, but it's my opinion that this is not the site, so I won't be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tom or Karen? Karen hasn't spoken.
I'll just ask questions.
Councillor Tom, Karen, Councillor.
Yeah, I will finish. Here's a provocative thinking there, Councillor Lawrenson. The big difference we've got here is a change to the level of assessment does not incur the costs of an adverse planning change. It does put in more focus the requirements of the biodiversity overlay that is on the site at the moment, and an impact accessible application under a biodiversity overlay will take into account all the values, as opposed to, and I think it, in my mind, and staff may come up with a better solution, by making all uses impact accessible. It does say that there's high levels. Not all of that block is in the highest conservation value ecosystem. There's 2 ecosystems, and not all the block is in the highest bushfire hazard. So there may be some options that can retain ecological value without necessarily losing the most significant aspects of it. They're all the things that in an impact accessible application that the applicant has to prove, in my mind, versus an applicant going to a code and saying we meet that one, we meet that one, we meet that, we meet that one, please approve it. And that's what this does. It avoids the issue of adverse planning effects and the flow on to potential compensation. It highlights what the values are, and yes, no doubt, if I was around in 2007, and I think there's on record some previous Councillor Melrose, I recall that statement and I concurred with it at the time. But we're not at ground zero, we're at this point in time, and to me this is the best step we can take right now. And I do believe that the specificity is one that staff can review and provide their assessment, and any other options within the time frame. It is deliberately brought up in my first notice of motion in 6 years, because I realised the time constraints we're under, and if I hadn't got, if staff weren't aware whether the majority or not the majority of councillors supported it, it would maybe not worth pursuing. But if we do get a majority of council supporting tonight, it gives staff a clear direction about what our priority is.
Thank you. I'll put the matter to a vote. All in favour? Councillors Brucevic, Stockwell, Wagner, Wilkie, Stewart, against Councillors Finzel and Lawrenson. Thank you. That brings us to item 8 of the agenda, which is the consideration of the committee reports. Firstly, we have the Planning and Environment Committee recommendations, page 8. Reports 1 to 6 were referred to the General Committee. Report 7, planning applications decided by delegated authority, February 2022. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the Planning and Environment Committee recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Seconded, Councillor Wagner. All in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Next are the Services and Organisation Committee recommendations. These are on page 10. Report number 1, contract number T000064, COOROY, BELLI, Creek Road Bridge Replacement. Report number 2, register of pre-qualified suppliers of business and marketing services. I, Councillor Stewart, inform the meeting that I have declarable conflict of interest in this matter, as I am a personal client of Insight Social Media, which is one of the 35 service providers that are proposed to be appointed to the panel for digital strategy and marketing. Please refer attachment 3. Although I have a declarable conflict of interest, I do not believe a reasonable person could have a perception of bias, because I believe I have had no influence on the operational decision of council officers to engage Insight Social Media. Therefore, I will choose to remain in the meeting room. However, I will respect the decision of the meeting on whether I can remain and participate in the decision. Councillor Wilkie, would you please assume the chair?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'll move the motion that Council note the declarable conflict of interest by Councillor Stewart, determine that it is in the public interest that Councillor Stewart participates and votes on this matter, because Council believes that Councillor Stewart had no influence on the operational decision of council officers to engage Insight Social Media. Indeed, they said during the committee that they had no idea that Councillor Stewart was even a client of Insight, and therefore a reasonable person would trust that the final decision is made in the public interest. May I have a seconder, please? Seconded, Councillor Lawrenson. All in favour? Councillor Stewart, do not vote on the motion. That's carried. Welcome back.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkie. Report number 3.
Do we have to deal with that item separately?
Yes. Would anyone like to remove the recommendation on page 10 of the agenda? Councillor Stockwell, seconded. Councillor Brucevic, thank you. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Report number 3, T00043, ICT Managed Services Tender Award. Report number 4, Noosa Shire Council Specialised Supplier List. Report 5, Noosa River Holiday Park Proposed Interim Management Agreement. Can I have a move? Thank
so moved, Madam Chair.
Councillor Finzel, all in favour, except we're dealt by separately. Thank you. Carried unanimously. Thank you, Linda. Now to the General Committee meeting recommendations, which are on page 12 of our agenda. Excuse me. MCU 19/0089.02 and OPW 19/0160.02. A minor change to development approval for retail business type 5, vehicle uses retail business type 2, shop and operational works, signage at 52 to 54 Mary Street, Noosaville. This is the subject of a further report that went Director General at report 7, so we'll deal with that then. Sorry, I'm just... I beg your pardon.
Madam Mayor, you're reading the right...
Sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing. Beg your pardon. Sorry. Please retract that. Yes, sorry. Report committees, item 1, MCU 21/0194, application for material change of use for roadside stall at 201 Mary River Road, COOROY. Please refer to further report at item 7, which we will deal with. We will deal with that now. No, later on. Okay.
Just leave it
It was actually,
It was
just,
dealt.
I think the way it's been recorded is incorrect. Item 7 was dealt with in association with item 1, so the minutes should probably have the resolution at that point there.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Stockwell. Report 2. Minor change to an existing approval for dual occupancy at 21/22 and 2/22 Kingfisher Drive, Peregian Beach. Councillor.
There's a report. Sorry, there's a report directed in the ordinary meeting on this one. So
okay, we'll defer it to the ordinary meeting. Yes. Report. I will refer it to later.
Yeah.
Report 3. application for a material change of use, multiple dwellings, 8 times dwelling units at 25 and 27 TOOLAR Street, TEWANTIN. I note that this applicant, the council note the report by the project coordinator planning to the Planning and Environment meeting dated 12th of April 2022 regarding application number MCU 21/0083 for a development permit for material change of use, multiple dwelling situated at 25 and 27 TOOLAR Street, Toronto, and note that the applicant has stopped the decision period pursuant to Planning Act 2016.
I believe we have to move that as a separate item. No, it's a fresh motion tonight. It's not the motion of the general committee.
Yes, it is.
It was.
Yes, it is. That was.
Oh, that one was stopped. It's the other one that was. Sorry,
Yes,
I do apologise.
General committee. Yes, it was.
It's a rare meeting that we have two at the same.
Yes, no, it was.
It's the
It's the
subdivision.
second, yes,
Subdivision.
it's the COOROIBAH. Report 4, MCU 17/0076.01, application for another change to a development approval for multiple housing type 2 duplex to include short-term accommodation operational works at 1/25 Edward Street, Noosaville. I'd like to deal with this item separately. Would anyone like to move a motion?
I'm happy to move the motion that's in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor
I'll
Stockwell.
second that.
Thank you, Councillor Jurcevic. Would you like to speak to the motion?
No.
No, thank you. I'll put the motion to a vote. All in favour? Councillor Jurcevic, Stockwell, Wegner, Wilkie. Against? Councillors Finzel, Lawrenston and Stewart. Thank you. Report 5, application for operational work, prescribed title works at 10 to 12 Ravenwood Drive,
Yes.
Noosa Heads.
That's an order meeting.
Yeah, that's further report. Further report.
This is, yes, this is subject of a further report direct to the ordinary meeting, so we'll deal with this later in the meeting.
Yeah. Item 6, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move it.
What were you moving?
Item 6, Noosa River Oyster Ecosystem Restoration Project Update. I'd like to move the motion as written in the report, minus Part D.
So as per the staff recommendation.
As part of the staff recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Does that mean we can't put
Thank you, councillors. Staff have recently advised that the conditions of the key state permits have been received and approved by the Nature Conservancy. The pivotal approvals include state permit giving owners consent with conditions to restore reefs to the Noosa River. Another is the development permit for operational works in the river. Another is a general fisheries licence to handle oysters. Another is approval for TNC to be a registered resource provider. These were the pivotal approvals beyond TNC or the council's power to issue, but through working cooperatively in partnership with the state in this innovative project, they've achieved this. The development permit for operational works prescribed title under the Planning Act will now allow Noosa Council staff to get on with it. Council officers are finalising the assessment, and this will be reported to Council in the next few weeks. And tonight's motion allows us to move forward.
I've got a question, Kim. My correspondence with you this morning was that you had not received the Resource Allocation Authority, RAA, under the Fisheries Management Act 1994 and Fisheries Management Regulation 2008, Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. Not yet issued was the words, and operational works application, again, the words not yet issued. Can you confirm that, please?
Yes, through the chair. As per the information provided to councillors, there are 5 permits required, 3 of which have been approved, 3 key state approvals, as Councillor Wilkie just outlined. There's 1 remaining, which is the Resource Allocation Authority, which is nearing completion, but we have not received that final approval yet. And then, of course, there is Council's operational works application, which council officers are in the process of assessing.
So it's correct that out of those 5, we still have 2 to receive. That is correct, isn't it?
Yes.
So, Kim, it's true that the council staff can get on with the operational works now, that assessment?
Yes, that's correct. We've received response from the state agencies.
Yeah.
Through SARA, we've received conditional approval from the state agencies via that. and we are now undertaking our own assessment as per normal assessment of an operational works application, which will be reported to council.
And that SARA was what was the pivotal assessment approval from the state that allowed the Noosa Council now to get its own approval process underway.
Yes, the
Operational works.
SARA conditional approval is a necessary a part of council's assessment as part of the operational works application.
Thank you.
But Kim, I mean, we've got 5 state approvals we have to get.
Point of order, is this a question?
It is a question. I'm just clarifying. We've got 5. That's correct, isn't it, Kim? We need 5 permits.
That is correct.
And
that is correct.
We still, at this point in time before us, have 2 permits which we have not yet received. So therefore, we can't say that Section 13C has been adhered to because we haven't received all state permits. Is that correct?
That's correct. The Resource Allocation Authority under the Fisheries Management Act, which is issued by the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, has not yet been received. The 5th permit is not a state permit, it is council's under the Planning Act, an operational works application, which, as I just outlined, is under assessment.
So just for clarity, Kim, we do not have formal permission from the state to build reefs in the riverbed.
The Nature Conservancy have not yet received approval under the Resource Allocation Authority permit by the Department of Fisheries, as just mentioned. So that remaining permit is in its final stages. There's been discussions and consideration of all the draft conditions, but we have not yet received that final approval.
So therefore, again, just to get this in my head, we do not have state approvals to proceed. We cannot commence building reefs in the Noosa River without this one state approval. Is that correct?
That's right. Works cannot commence until this permit's been achieved.
What does the owners? The state has given owners consent. What does that? What does that give the? What does it mean by giving owners consent?
Mary's still in the room. She might want to comment here.
Yeah, she's still here, Kim.
Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, it's authority to lodge the application. So So the application, as Kim has indicated, is currently under assessment, and we're looking to report that operational works up next round.
Thanks. Kim, sorry. I've got a question about that. I'm looking at the Nature Conservancy, some of the forms that you provided us all this morning, development application details. Specifically at the end, it says the estimate. What is the monetary value of the proposed operational work? And the estimate that's been written by, I presume, the Nature Conservancy, because I think it's come from them, it has, is 500,000. Can you give us a breakdown or an outline of how that 500,000 figure came about?
Councillor Stewart, I'm not sure what document you're referring to. Can you?
Sure. It was one of the ones that you sent through this morning that was in the email that you sent to all councillors. I believe it's dated 13th of October 2021, and it says, Dear Bobby, reference is made, and then it talks at the back of that, it's a DA Form 1, Development Application Details. That was...
Owner's consent.
If you go further into that, but I'm looking at the 500,000, that's my question.
If it helps, it's the document that says the department hereby gives owners consent as the owner to accompany the development application for the purpose of operational works for tidal works for the placement of oyster bed restoration.
It says also, although owners consent to the development application is being provided no tenure under the Land Act is required, your client is to undertake works on the land only if and when the development application has been approved by the assessment manager and in accordance with the conditions of that approval. So it's in that suite of documents, Kim?
Yes, I may need to take that question on notice. But in general, when, and Kerry, you might be better to provide any detail on this, when applications for owner's consent or permits are sought, often there's an estimate of value of development that's provided. So it potentially could be that, but I will have to take it on notice to provide you that detail.
I haven't seen the documents, so I'm not quite sure what we're referring to, but there's a requirement to pay once a development reaches a certain value, they have to pay a superannuation contribution, but I'm not quite sure what the documents are referring to.
This just says what is the monetary value of the proposed operational work, and it says estimate 500,000.
Right.
That's it there. I just wanted a breakdown of those figures for complete clarification and openness, I guess.
Yeah.
I just have another question. How does the approval of these permits relate to the planning application for seeking approval for the built infrastructure plan for the Noosa River? Can you tell us how that process works? I have got some pictures I'd like put up because I just need to see in my mind where in the river this infrastructure is tended to go that's under discussion, please.
So it's a fairly standard process under the Planning Act. People, when they're doing works in tidal areas, so in the river, must lodge an application for operational works. It's called prescribed tidal works. So the oyster reef in some ways is treated no differently to a jetty in the river or in Noosa Sound. So there's a requirement for an operational works application. The state is a referral agency for part of that application, and we are unable to decide, council's not able to make a decision on that application until we receive the state agency conditions, which we now have, and that's why we're finalising our assessment on the application for operational works for the oyster assessment, because we can now finalise that assessment, report the matter to council for consideration and a decision. So fairly standard process there under the Planning Act.
Thank you, Kerry. So just to clarify, you said the state is the referral agency. I'm not a planner, and you have the conditions. Does that mean the conditions will inform whether or not we get the permit?
No, just to explain referral agency, what that means is they are a party to the application and they may direct council to refuse an application or direct council to impose conditions on approval. They assess their aspects for which is stipulated by the Act of what they have to assess, which is about generally navigational channels. The fact that it's in, I think there's 3 triggers on this one. It's in a fish habitat area and a coastal management area, I think from memory, but we'd have to check that for you. So they are referred to for 3 reasons, and they make those assessments on those 3 elements. They have provided us with conditions. Council then needs to make its own assessment against the planning scheme and to make a decision whether they're happy it complies with the planning scheme, and if they were to approve it, they have to include conditions from the referral agency that we've just recently received.
Thank you. Given the volume and the cost to many, the community, are you confident that this will be able to proceed forward through the state?
Well, I think, to be fair, we are still making our assessment. So we've actually gone to an external marine biologist to help us in the assessment, because we're not experts in that field. And so really I can't tell you our office's position on what we're going to recommend yet, because we're making an independent assessment, notwithstanding council has, has some collaboration in this project.
I'd like to move some amendments, please. So I'd like to add a D. Seek to consult. Oh, sorry, C, D, E. So, oh, it's already there. Sorry, excuse me.
Councillor has deleted D, which I'll come to question in a minute. So
okay. So, seek to consult with stakeholders. Yep. Authorise the CEO to consult with Council's Audit and Risk Committee. So I'll start again. Add seek to consult with stakeholders, including the Noosa River Advisory Group and the broader community, to gauge overall community support for the renewal of the Noosa River Alliance and funding agreement. Authorise the CEO to consult with Council's Audit and Risk Committee and seek advice that the arrangements are appropriate and in alignment with Council's risk management framework, and provide a further report on the outcomes of the consultation and seek a further resolution of the Council to help inform and guide future negotiations.
Before that seconded, I've got a question for Councillor Wilkie. My question, Councillor Wilkie, is you moved the motion, the original motion, and you asked for D to be omitted, which says review the procurement administrative processes to investigate the project risks associated with the project and how these are to be mitigated and incorporated into key performance indicators and any other matters that the Council should be made aware of in entering into this agreement. My question is, why would you omit D when that is purely just increasing transparency and openness for this project?
Look, I think I'll leave my answer to the debate if anyone wants to raise that issue. I don't think it's a genuine, my short answer is I don't think it's a genuine motion because the councillors who moved it didn't, when it came to the final vote on ratifying it, didn't vote for it. So if you don't support it, why should I?
That's not justification. We've heard Councillor Stockwell said it to
So are we at informal debate now? Are you speaking to the motion?
No, I'm asking a question. Is that the only reason? Because councillors who voted for it didn't support it. Is that the reason?
Probably a multitude of reasons, but I've given my reason. If the councillors that wanted it couldn't, when it came to finally ratifying that as part of the motion, couldn't support it, why should I? I don't think it's a genuine motion.
Can I have a question through the chair to the CEO then? In terms of process with regards to amendments, is the mayor able to put that amendment in tonight? And at what stage?
So, councillors, the stage of the debate or the process that you're currently in right now is that you have a motion on the floor. Councillor Lawrenson has put forward an amendment to that motion. We are waiting for a seconder. That will need to follow a process. Should there be a seconder to the amendment from Councillor Lawrenson, and at a point in time, if further amendments are made, it can be made at that time. But we have a motion before us with an amendment that's been put by Councillor Lawrenson, awaiting a seconder, and then the process will follow again from there.
Anyone seconding Councillor Lawrenson's amendment?
Just trying to read.
Sorry, Joe, I'll read it out.
I don't need it read out.
You don't need it
Yeah,
read out?
can you read it out, please?
Do you want me to read it out?
Yes, please.
I'm happy to read it out.
Councillors, please just wait for Minutes and Agenda Secretary to catch up if that's possible, so that we can have that fully before the council, and then please continue through the mayor.
So D.
Will you let us know, Linda?
Yeah, sorry. Just got taken.
Okay, so D, seek to consult with stakeholders, including the Noosa River Advisory Group and the broader community, to gauge overall community support for the renewal of the Noosa River Alliance and funding agreement. E, authorise the CEO to consult with Council's Audit and Risk Committee and seek advice that arrangements are appropriate and in alignment with Council's risk and compliance management framework. F, request the CEO to provide a further report on the outcomes of the consultation to help inform and guide future negotiations.
Do we have a second?
Excuse me, I just have a question through the chair to the CEO. Given the stress of the last week or so, I just need clarification. If I second this, am I able to put an amendment in, or do I need to put it in now? Just lost track of the meeting process. I can't second you then.
Through the mayor, no, that would be the motion that you'd have on the floor and you seconded in its entirety as it stands. So no, I don't believe that you'd have the ability to have a further amendment to what you have seconded. That would then become the motion on the floor.
Can I
so I'm
clarify?
happy to be
Yeah, can I
Correct.
clarify? Once anything is a motion or not, that it's only the original mover and the original seconder that is barred from doing amendments. So anyone can do an amendment, but you can't amend an amendment. So you'd have to wait for the outcome of this particular amendment and then proceed to move it
So
up.
can we go back to see who moved the original, Councillor Wilkie and Councillor Wagner seconded? So they're the only two who could not do amendments. So
Yes.
we could argue on this
But
amendment
you need to
And
deal
then
with this before.
vote.
and then vote.
And then I put the amendment up after the vote.
Yes, so then it forms part of the original motion. I'll second this, Councillor Lyons.
Okay.
Okay. I added these amendments the other afternoon at the general meeting, and I've had the opportunity over the last couple of days to reword the amendment after a lot of debate and discussion. This is too important a matter not to have another go at putting forward community consultation. The community is divided on this, and we know over the last 2 days the public outcry. I'm going to proceed, and I ask that everyone at this table listen respectfully and debate respectfully. We have an obligation to conduct ourselves in a respectful manner, and we also have an obligation to our children and anyone watching this that we actually respect each other, and we actually do really respect each other and like each other, and sometimes that is not properly displayed. So I'm just going to move on. This is not about environment. You know, I spoke about risk, and I spoke about community, and I spoke about consultation and making decisions in the best interest of the community. I've said it the other day, and I'll say it again. Lots has happened since 2019 and today. KPIs have not been met. We've just heard we still haven't received a state approval to proceed. Operational works, we've heard again today, that's still being assessed by council. We heard the other day that if the project does go ahead, there is a major risk that it's going to fail. And we know the community is split on this project. My amendment, all it does is authorise council and the CEO to go to the greater community and ask the questions. Ask, do you want us to proceed? Is spending or committing the balance of $1.2 million, is that what the community wants? Or are there other projects that the community would like to have their money invested in? We've so far received, and I'm repeating myself, but it's important. We've received emails from the Chamber of Commerce, and I listed all the communities that supported their submission. I didn't add the Noosa Boating Fishing Alliance to that, but I do want to make a point that the associations, all 8 or 9 of them, actually represent 1,100, more than 1,100 businesses and residents. That's a lot of people in this community that don't support this project. In fairness, we've also received emails from other community groups like NICA, like the Biosphere, like the Noosa resident ratepayers, and from individual residents that support it. To ensure that we make a decision that is fair and equitable, and more so to help build community confidence that council's making decisions in their best interest, we just have to go back to the community and consult. The project, we know it's ambitious. We know there is a risk it may fail. And we know there may be opportunities. This has got to be spelled out and given to the community. We need to ensure that the community actually understands the risk. And further, that this project is consistent with council's own risk management frameworks. And that's why I added the E to that council authorises the CEO to consult with its Audit and Risk Committee. We have an advisory committee of council. It's independent of council's management, and it's been established under the Local Government Act for this very purpose, to assist council to discharge its responsibility of due care and diligence in relation to risk management. It's therefore important, as part of the consultation, that we consult with our own Audit and Risk Committee and seek advice that what we're doing is appropriate and is in alignment with council's risk management framework and compliance framework, including whether or not we are operating within our own risk appetite, the risk appetite set by council. Again, repeat myself, environmental levy is paid by every ratepayer. It's their money, it therefore must be their decision.
Thanks, Councillor. So anyone else like to
I'd like to ask a question of the CEO, and I don't know if he's going to be able to answer it because he wasn't here at the time. Do matters like this get referred to, individual matters like this get referred to council as an Audit and Risk Committee, and possibly not the CEO, but through the CEO to someone that is involved with the Audit and Risk Committee? Was the Audit and Risk Committee aware at the time that this went through council of the risks associated with this project?
Through the Mayor, in response, Councillor Jurisiewicz, it is appropriate for the Council from time to time to refer matters to the Risk and Audit Committee to be able to be reviewed. Having said that, though, this is well progressed, this particular project, and is entering its final stages. I understand that the nexus of the project was in 2014. It can be referred, and that can occur. I would need to defer to the Acting Director of Corporate Services in relation to the second part of your question, and gives if Trent is able to answer that. Otherwise, we may take that element on notice and come back to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Stockwell.
Yeah, I'll talk to them. I won't support it. I think the CEO raised a point that we're nearing completion of this particular Alliance grant project. And this one has a undefined reference to a renewal, which it's unclear whether it's talking about a fresh Alliance grant type approach for more reefs, or whether it's about the extension of the current contract to be needed to achieve the outcomes of the existing Alliance agreement. There has been extensive review every 6 months for the report. Similar questions in this term of council have been raised, and one of the highly experienced chief executive officer who comes from a corporate service and financial background reassured councillors on each occasion that the way that the agreement was structured and framed was both legal and appropriate. It is a project that aligns with strategic objectives of this council, and it's one that the agreement that was put in place is over and above what is normally put in place for an Alliance agreement under our grant scheme, and has had a level of overview which we've heard since the last meeting that exceeds the requirements for similar grants from the federal government. To ask staff to go through this process is asking them to retrospectively look at something that's nearing an end at the cost to ratepayers. And that's what we have to mind. Are we trying to really achieve an aim of a commitment and a partnership that on every occasion since it was first initiated a majority of this council has supported? I think that's really important to understand. The majority of this council on every occasion has supported an agreement, have an alliance to build oyster reefs. There is no suggestion of any impropriety. The only delay has been in getting a approval through a range of bureaucratic processes, of which one key one is outstanding, but we know from the advice given to us draft conditions of the Resource Allocation Authority have been issued. There have been some minor tweaks and they're awaiting an offer to come back from holidays. It would be unwise, in my opinion, to go down a path as outlined in DENF to unnecessary spend ratepayers' money to perhaps meet some previous commitment not to support this project.
Can I ask the question?
Is it in debate?
You can ask questions.
I can ask a question. Can I ask the question? Reference was made to costs to ratepayers. Probably question directed to the CEO. Cost of consulting with community groups and requesting and consulting with the Audit and Risk Committee. Would you agree that that would be a huge cost or a small cost to ratepayers?
Through the Mayor, Councillor Morrison, and without being drawn into the debate on this particular matter, I would say that to expeditiously deliver this for Council, we would probably outsource any community consultation. That would come at a cost. I could give a figure, but please note that this is an estimate that I'm taking off the top of my head to be able to try and answer your question that you have. Somewhere in the vicinity of $20,000 to $30,000, I think, could be allocated for community consultation to be done correctly and ensure that the voices of the community are heard. Referring back through the Risk and Audit Committee, that would just be additional workload for the staff that are engaged in delivering that. So that would be an operational cost. But to ensure that we did have a degree of openness and transparency, my recommendation to Council on consultation would be is that we would put that to a third party, and that would ensure that that is at arm's length and those results come back. But my advice and my answer to your question without being drawn into the debate.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to?
Yeah, I'd like to speak. I will support this. I think the aim is about good governance and the process and equity to all. That is my goal, that we find a resolution where we can, act with excellence and represent the entire community and bring balance to this. And I think that the amendments put up will help find the balance in the space as we aim to find a resolution and bring resolve to this community. This has gone on since 2014, well before my time in this position. And I think the intent here is that it is about the aim to present a process that is open, transparent, and shines a light on excellence. And this is where I believe this council would like to build on that and continue to improve in that space. So I will be supporting this.
Councillor Finsel. Would anyone else like to speak to the amendment?
Yeah, I will. I won't be supporting the amendment. It seeks to consult with stakeholders, including the Noosa River Advisory Group. Given advice the other day, the Noosa River Advisory Group have been consulted about this and are in favour and support the project going forward. The authorisation for the CEO to consult with the Council's Audit and Risk Committee. I've been here through the entire process here. I was on the Audit and Risk Committee. I'm sure that they were aware of the risk of this and informed of the risk of this going forward. So going back to the Audit and Risk Committee, I feel it's unnecessary. I feel that's just double take. There's been some inference again with regard to transparency, good governance, open and transparent council, and excellence. This has always been at the forefront of all of the reporting on this project. To say otherwise is cast an aspersion, I guess, on the council of the time that was there. And I was part of that council, so I feel an element of offence to that because I believe we went through due diligence. I was happy to support a review going back with some fresh eyes on it in light of any further agreements going forward to see that all of that was undertaken. Not an issue, but I don't think we need to go to this extent. I see that the elements being requested here are really re-prosecuting or trying to go back over all of the elements that we've done over all the years of this project going forward, and to do this at the final hurdle to getting on to actually putting those this into the water, I struggle with. I'm sorry, I can't support it.
I have a question, Sean. My understanding is I was at that last meeting where at the Noosa River Stakeholder Advisory Group where a presentation or an update was given in regard to this project, but at no time was I privy to, or perhaps please correct me if I'm wrong if this has been done outside any of those meetings where a vote was undertaken and support was garnished from the Noosa River Stakeholder Advisory Group and its members. My understanding is the last time they met, it was just to give an update on the project.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Stewart. That is correct. The committee has been provided with information and advice about the project because it was already a council-approved project. They have been out on a boat and inspected the site, so they're very well informed of the project. And I also note that a number of the stakeholders are actively being engaged in the community consultation activities underway. But you're correct in stating that there was not a vote passed.
And it would be my understanding that that no vote has been taken and that it could potentially be somewhat divided on this issue. Yeah,
on similar matters to this, where council doesn't necessarily need the basically majority vote for NSERAC. Consultants or stakeholders are just engaged with them one-on-one to get a perspective. For instance, the non-powered water sports study underway at the moment, the consultants have engaged with the members one-on-one to provide, individual sort of views, which will go into the broader consultation activity.
Thanks. I'll speak to this motion. I will support this motion. I actually think it's a good motion. I think it's a prudent motion. We've just heard that the Noosa River Stakeholder Advisory Group don't have a position. They've been advised of, but they don't have actually a formalised position nor a unanimous position in regard to this. So it would be good to understand what that is. I think it is prudent to have a look at this. I mean, I've got a question of $500,000 here no one can answer. Right, what is the monetary value proposed of operational works? Can't get an answer. Right, that is something that the Audit and Risk Committee can have a look at. I'm sure that money's justified, but I'd like to know what it's for, and I think the ratepayer has when that is put down on a piece of paper and on an application, I think that we all deserve a right to know what that accounts for. It's just being prudent. It's just being cautious in regard to our risk management. I don't think we're anywhere near we're not at the end stages of this project. In fact, we heard during the week that we've only outlaid approximately $232,000. We still have, if we've made a 1.2 million commitment, we still have over $900,000 left to commit to this project. So I don't think we're anywhere near the end stages. I think we're only just beginning. We've heard we do not have, the state have not granted us permits to put any structures as it stands today or any reefs currently in our river system. We've heard that. We have a number of the permits have been achieved, but at this stage, we've heard that our operational works at council are still being assessed, and the project can't actually begin until we receive that permit to put those structures in our river. So I think that this enables the community to come on the journey with us. This is a divisive issue. We've seen that over the past week. It's one that's very important and emotive to many in our communities. Some are positive, some are negative. This gives the ability for stakeholders to be involved, to gauge the pulse. We are fundamentally changed since 2019. There are a lot of nice to haves, but we just can't afford it. We are in budget deliberations and we are all acutely aware of the impacts that COVID have had on this organisation. 2022 looks a lot different to what 2019 did, and no one could have foreseen what would have happened. But here we find ourselves. We must now more than ever be prudent in our deliberations, in our discussions, and in where we put our money. And so I'll be talking to this later, but there are other projects that we don't need to wait for any approvals to begin, that we can begin right here, right now, that will go a long way to addressing our environmental concerns around our river systems. So, Councillor Lawrenson, thank you for putting up this amendment. I will be supporting it tonight.
Look, councillors, I do respect that Councillors Stewart, Finzel and Lawrenson have actively tried to end this project. And I hope that they can respect and understand that their comments and amendments now are seen in that light. From the outset, this project has had stringent and detailed oversight, as detailed in a 25-page alliance and funding agreement that has been a public document since 2019. No one would condemn any councillor for not knowing or seeking advice on where to find project monitoring or information about risk assessment and project milestones and deliverables and KPIs. The question is whether it's reasonable to claim or infer through debate or motions that proper oversight doesn't exist when it most clearly does. Pages 19 to 24 of the Alliance and Funding Agreement, which has been a public document since 2019, outlines over 30 key performance objectives and deliverables that have been reported against in all 3 publicly available annual reports and all 3 6-monthly reports. They include items such as the establishment of a technical advisory group from key stakeholders and Kabi with terms of reference to give expert oversight on the permitting process. A project implementation and public engagement plan detailing at a minimum a detailed risk assessment associated with this project. That was a deliverable. It was done. A monitoring, evaluation and reporting plan which identified ecological and social monitoring programs and how they will be reported on and how this will feed back into the project. This monitoring, evaluation and reporting plan was peer reviewed to provide extra governance and assurance at the request of dissenting councillors, and when it returned a favourable result, it was still rejected. Other deliverables, annual report, project reports and final reports, each of which addresses at a minimum activities throughout the year, status and progress against deliverables, budget and spending progress, income and expenditure reporting against the monitoring and evaluation programs and others. It's all there. Risk assessment, financial oversight, reporting against deliverables. They're all in the 3 annual and 6 monthly reports, 3 6-monthly reports. Yet some unfairly and unreasonably and keep inferring this is not happening. Familiarising ourselves with these aspects of the project is due diligence. Why impose onerous conditions requiring staff to compile all this publicly available material for us when it's there? No one would condemn a councillor for not knowing where to find it. We all ask staff where to get it from time to time. And just as an extra peer review was required under the guise of better governance and the result rejected, an amendment was moved on Tuesday, D, supposedly to provide much needed oversight, but when it came to the final vote, it was not supported by those who wanted it. So if councillors are continually not supporting the final vote to ratify changes that will put staff to work, their behest, under the call of better governance, when so much oversight already exists, and when some have even tried to actively kill off this project, I do question whether it's a genuine motion or not. We've heard repeatedly from our directors and managers that this organisation is already understaffed, understressed and overworked. Yet we appear to be ordering staff to do the reporting and information gathering we can do ourselves when they need to be getting on with the constellation of many projects we've already burdened them with. That's why I'm not supporting this motion, this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to close?
Our job is to make the best decision for the overall public interest. The Queensland Local Government Act states that councils should advocate on issues that are important to their community. Councillor Wilkie, I'm not convinced that this matter is important to our community. I said in my debate that there are over 1,100 businesses that don't support this project. And I have a duty as a councillor to represent their views. This council has made a public commitment to transparent and open processes. Further, it's made a commitment to effective consultation on issues that affect our community. This is an issue that affects our community and they are entitled to consultation.
Thank you. I will put the amendment to a vote. All in favour? Councillors Lawrence, Finzel, Stewart. Against? Councillors Jurcevic, Councillors Wilkie, Councillor Brian and Councillor Tom. Motion is lost. I'd like to move a further amendment, thank you Alinda, to the original. I'd like D put back on the table, please. So, Belinda, are you right? Yep. So, for the purposes of those listening... sorry, thank you, sorry. Second, thank you, Councillor Lawrenston. D, this was originally 5-2 was at the General Committee, was supported. It's back on the motion, the amendment now. It stands as review the procurement administrative processes to instigate the project, risks associated with the project, and how these are to be mitigated and incorporated into key performance indicators and any other matters that the council should be made aware of in entering into the agreement. Look, take on board what Councillor Wilkie said, but the voting practices of this council and what we choose to vote and not vote for should not determine increased transparency, openness, and a review of the procurement processes associated with this project. In fact, it wasn't the first time that people have put up amendments and voted against the full motion. In fact, Councillor Stockwell, I remember the first time I did it, you said it took me 2 years to do that. So everyone has been guilty or potentially guilty of that at some point in time. It is no reason to vote down what is a good part of an amendment and that will give further information and clarity to a council that wasn't around and didn't authorise this project. This was done in 2019. This council has not had the opportunity to have available to it all the information that you have, the procurement and administrative processes to investigate this project, the risks, and how they can be incorporated into key performance indicators are basic, fundamental things that we should have no problem with. We should have no problem with this. This should just be basic, good governance. That's what it is. How can you argue against it? Because we didn't vote for the whole project? You voted, that does not make to me any sense. This is something that, as I said, 5-2 was supported on Tuesday, and this has been an emotional issue, and people may be upset that, you know, the community does not like it, and some people do, some people don't. But that's not our decision. Our decision is to debate what's in the best interest of our community. This amendment D is in the best interest of our community. It does seek further information, further clarity on any project, on any document that we are committing $1.2 million worth of ratepayer money. This is what we should be doing. Not just for this, but across the board. As I said, there is so much money here at stake. This is such an important project for our community to get right, because the opportunity costs are significant. If we don't go forward with this project, what else can we do? What else is on the table? As I said, within budget deliberations, we've seen how difficult and times have become since COVID. We've seen our community fundamentally change. We need to reassure and we need to confirm that this project is what everyone wants to see going forward. And so I think that this is a no-brainer. I think reviewing a project and providing further information and shining a light on it does nothing but help. And so I'd ask that you support it.
Question C, with regard to reviewing the procurement and administrative process to instigate the project, risks associated with the project, and how these to be mitigated and incorporated in key performance indicators, and any other matters the council should be made aware of in entering the agreement. We understand this to be into a new agreement or into an extension of the agreement that currently exists.
Through the Mayor, in response, Councillor Jurisiewicz, at this point in time, I think we could, with the agreement of the Nature Conservancy put this into the current agreement on an extension basis. However, if it was not to their agreement, and this does become the resolution of the council, on an extension there would need to be a new agreement, is my view. But I would consult with them first. If we could add that, extend the current, would be the best way. If we were unable to have that, as it is a resolution of council, it would definitely be a go, no-go scenario as far as negotiations.
So as far as staff time and the effort to undergo this review, I'm assuming that yourself would be involved in this. Who would you envisage would be involved in this review?
Through the Mayor in response, Councillor Jurisic, it would be myself, the team that have been around the project already, and then I'd ask for some assistance from executive services and potentially corporate services, gathering the information, analysing the information, and then ensuring that's encapsulated in either an extension or a new agreement that's then further brought back to the council for council's final resolution before signature.
Can I speak to this? Okay. Yes, thank you, Mayor, for putting up this amendment. I will be supporting it. In a contradiction to Councillor Wilkie's inference that I'm actively trying to end this, I would like to say that I'm actively promoting good outcomes for everyone with regards to this project. I'm not actively trying to end it. I am seeking merely information to inform decision making. I support this. I think anything that proceeds forward to bring about continuous improvement and strong leadership with values that promote excellence in line with our corporate themes is something worth addressing if we feel that we can do better. And I think that we can do better. I think we can all learn a lot from the outcome. We can learn a lot also from listening to our community, and we can learn a lot from each other. And I think diversity is good around the table, and I think that we need to have a rigorous approach to questioning processes and question how we've arrived at this place. And I think through the lens of difference and diversity, we can provide excellent leadership to this community, and I will be supporting this amendment.
Councillor Diesel, anyone else like to speak to this
amendment? Don't really want to discuss it. I'm just a little bit, just want on record that I'm disappointed that it was taken out in the first place. As Councillor Finzel and Councillor Stewart have articulated, this is what we committed to: continuous improvement, transparency and openness, good governance. I'm disappointed. I totally support reinstating what was already previously approved 5-2 on Tuesday.
I won't repeat the arguments from the last amendment, but they are the same. It is about, is this wasting ratepayer money? And should it happen to get up, I will be moving a further amendment to make sure that it is costed and reported what the cost of such a review is. We did mention the significant level of transparency, accountability and governance that had been throughout this process, and Councillor Wilkie and Councillor Jurisic indicated that the Audit and Risk Committee previously has been no issues raised. I also point out that the Queensland Audit Office does look at our organisation and has never raised issue. So we have experts employed, paid large salaries. We have independent people coming in, employed, to give us advice. Not once in the 3 years of the project has any concern been raised in terms of the issues that this seeks to address. Why? Why, when the council has a commitment to an alliance, to a partnership, to best practice science-driven project, would we, at a minute to midnight, go back and review what we know to be a robust, accountable and well-founded agreement?
One question, Deb, it's for you. Has the Oyster project ever appeared on the Audit and Risk Committee register? Or been determined by the Audit and Risk Committee?
Through the Chair, no, I don't believe it has been specifically identified in the Strategic Risk Register.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
I have to respectfully disagree with the Mayor when she says it doesn't matter what you do, but what you vote for in terms of amendments and motions. What you do vote for when it comes to finalising a motion shows what you want this organisation to dedicate its resources to. And if you don't vote for it to ratify any amendment as part of a motion to put into effect those wishes, in this case this oversight, especially when there's so much oversight already existing, then you're not fair dinkum. And if you don't believe enough in it to vote for it right through to the final conclusion, then why should anyone else? As I said before, I respect the right of Mayor Stewart, Councillor Finzel and Councillor Lawrenson to vote for a motion to end this report. But they need to understand now that any subsequent motions or amendments under the guise of better oversight, when so much already exists, is always going to be seen in that light. And I agree, it's an unnecessary burden on ratepayers, on staff, and I cannot in all conscience support it. Maybe if voting patterns had been different and that you'd supported your motions through your amendments right through to the end to ratify them to the point where they're acted on by staff, I would be viewing these differently. But also, I already believe that there's already sufficient oversight. And no one is condemning anyone for not knowing where all the information is. There's a lot of information that's been reported over the years, but to demand more and more get the staff to do more and more reporting when it's already there for you is something also I can't support.
Joe.
Look, as I did the other day, I am going to support this. And the reason I'm going to support this is because when that concern of the community came, first thing I did was go to the CEO and say, Mr. CEO, with a fresh pair of eyes, with a fresh acting environment manager, can you just cast your eyes over this and see if you can see anything untoward that needs review? I'm not expecting a deep dive. I'm not expecting this to be torn to pieces. I'm not expecting this to be gone through and scrutinised to the nth degree. An overview of the procurement and administrative process to make sure that we've got all our I's, crossed all our T's, and that there's nothing untoward here. I'm confident with the process that we've undertaken to get to this stage, over all the years I've watched this process, that's been adhered to. All the reporting that we're hearing tells us that that's been adhered to. I don't expect this to be a long and lengthy process to undergo an administrative review. So I'm happy to support that, and I'm happy to support the concerns of the community that brought their concerns to us, so that we do see that if anything here is untoward or that needs review, particularly if we're going to enter into an additional agreement beyond the current agreement for further oyster reefs, with the success of this going forward, and I'm confident in the success of this going forward, that we know what we're entering into. And I appreciate that the three councillors that object to this, or three of the councillors object to this, weren't here for the process going forward. So I understand you've got reservations. I understand there are elements of the community that we've got conversation. But at the end of the day, it's our job as councillors, when the community's divided, to make a decision. And my decision is to support you in your review, but also to support this project going forward.
Councillor Tom, just. Okay, I'll close. Councillor Wilkie, it does, if I was unclear, it does matter what you vote for. Our duty is to represent our ratepayer. Our duty is to speak to our ratepayer and our resident. And our duty is to do exactly what is prescribed of us under our Code of Conduct, under the Local Government Act, and by adding that, even if we didn't vote for the whole of the motion as it was in its entirety, that is speaking for our ratepayer. That is what our resident and our ratepayer demands of us, expects of us. It's good governance. So that is why that has been added. Thank you, Councillor Jurcevic. I appreciate you supporting us in this motion. I think it's a good one. I think it's a strong one. I think it's one that will be of only benefit. We talk about not wasting our ratepayer money. Absolutely. So before we enter into a contract to expend over $900,000 of ratepayer money, let's be sure that we are absolutely in agreement. Let's be sure we've taken our community on the journey, and let's be sure that it is in the best interests of our community. So thank you, Councillor Jurcevic, again, and for Councillors Sorensen and Finzel for your support in this one. As I said, it was one that had already come up 5-2, so I'm hoping that that will continue and it will be a great thing for the community and for this project. Thank you. I'll put it to a vote in favour. Councillor Jurcevic, Finzel, Lawrence and Stewart against. Councillors Wilkie, Councillor Tom, Councillor Bryan. Amendment is carried. Thank you. Councillor Stockwell.
I have a further amendment. And that amendment to add whatever the next number is, that the CEO be requested to keep a full record of staff time and costs and ancillary expenses associated with the conduct of the review and include these costs as part of the report back to Council.
Seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Jurcevic. Councillor Stockwell.
I do so. I think it's really important that that we do keep an eye on just what this does cost the community. And while it won't be coming out of the environment levy, it certainly will be coming out of getting other works done for the people who need it the most. It will be an administrative cost in my consideration is unwarranted.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Would anyone else like to speak to this?
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. I support this. It supports transparency. I'm more than happy to have that recorded. And for continuity and equity throughout the organisation, this is exactly what I'm seeking with regards to the whole TNC agreement and the Alliance grant. So I welcome it. Bring it on. I think that the community would love to see the results of where their ratepayer money is going. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Finzel. Would anyone else like to talk to this?
Yeah, I support this, Councillor Stockwell. It's exactly what Councillor Stewart, Finzel and myself have been debating for the last half hour. Good governance, transparency and openness. I also think it's good value. If the cost comes between 20 and 30,000, when we've got a balance of just under $1 million, still of ratepayers' money to be expended on this project, I think it's money well spent.
I too support it, Councillor Stockwell. I think, again, it is another good bow in the armour. And I think it's an important one. You're right, we need to be very prudent with our costings going forward, and I'm happy to support this.
I'm happy to support it. Councillors, be wary what you ask for. We start doing this for every time we ask the CEO to take something, so that we know what every minute and every hour and every dollar of the CEO's time is spent doing and staff's time is doing. We may well create a rod for our own back. There's an element of trust that goes in this job. And there's an element of trust that the council staff undertake the tasks that we do them prudently, within the time allowed, within the budgets that they have. So just keep that in mind.
Look, of course I support this. There's already going to be and has been explicit, clear, adequate reporting around the costs of the project so far and to its conclusion. That's mandated, that reporting. This will be a good exercise for councils to understand the cost of their extra instructions to the CEO and the staff to do this extra body of work. And I'm hoping that all councillors will support this when it becomes a part of the final motion. And that'll be the real test whether they believe it or not, in my opinion.
Councillor Tom.
in a way, I see once again we're asking the CEO to do our job. Perhaps he could keep a record of the costs and then take it out of our wages, because I kind of see this is our job to actually be on top of this stuff without going and putting it back on the staff saying, you know what, we kind of didn't read it, I don't know, like we're kind of across it, but would you tell us what to do? But I think that it's really our responsibility to dig deep and do this and to really understand this project and these projects. So I will support the motion, but I have to do it with a grain of salt.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Would you like to close? No, all to a vote. All in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, Belinda. That forms part of the
And
substantive motion. So,
Yep.
Councillor.
Yeah, I've got an amendment, please.
Yep.
Do I do that now?
Yes.
Or do I finish this off and then bring it up?
No.
No, you have to.
E, F, F, G, and H now.
Through the mayor, I think it's maybe adequately addressed already, but something the council can expect.
Okay. Do you think it's addressed already?
I believe it's adequately addressed, Councillor Finzel, but it is absolutely your call. Put it through.
Oh, I'm just going to put it through.
I'll second it for you, Councillor Hanson.
I'm putting this amendment forward.
Sorry, could I ask, because we haven't seen it before, could we have
Do you want me to read it out?
Yes, please.
Yes, please. And for the benefit of those online.
I haven't seen it either. None of us.
Benefit of those online
has
to
seen
view.
My apologies that you haven't seen it previously. It was took a day to sort of get all the information to put this together, and I appreciate the staff and the extra work that they took to deliver that for me today. The items B, F, G and H added to read. F, authorise the CEO as per the TNC Alliance Funding Agreement, clause 20.42. Amendments to this agreement may be proposed by either party at any time in writing to the other party. The terms of any amendment shall be negotiated by appointed contact officers and given effect by written agreement signed by both parties. G, contact the TNC in writing with a request to see the receipts and financials as per the Noosa Shire Council project acquittal form. And H, contact the TNC to commence in writing negotiations for inclusion within the current TNC Alliance funding agreement and or any future TNC Alliance funding agreements to include the proper disclosure of all funds spent, to include but not limited to all receipts and financials to align with the Noosa Shire Council acquittal guidelines policy, to accurately show who each supplier, contractor, receiver of funds, receipts, etc., to align with all other recipients of Noosa Shire Council funding without prejudice, the need to request in writing the information if Council wishes to see it as per the current project acquittal form. Thank you.
Any questions?
She's very bad. She's going to speak to
I'm just putting this forward. We've covered it all. I'll just be quickly in support of good governance, equity, transparency, and continuous improvement as a council, with the view of fostering good relations between councillors, staff, and community, in the hope of promoting good working relationships and professionalism, with a view to engender trust and build resilience through the application of aspirations for transformational leadership, with a model to identify needed change with a clear focus, create a vision where outcomes provide Noosa Shire residents and visitors alike a council they can be proud of, foster an ethical work environment to promote clear values, priorities, and standards. Build a culture with an emphasis on authenticity, cooperation, and open communication with respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Question for the CEO with regard to project acquittals. Can you give us an overview or an understanding with regard to project acquittals as to the information that's typically provided? Does it go into the depth of supplier, contractor, receiver of funds within our funding agreement?
Through the Mayor, Councillor Juricevic, and without going through this process for Noosa Council yet, I can only draw on my previous experience. Funding agreements, depending on their quantum, will have different requirements with regards to how we acquit. But we would, I think, and given the quantum of funds being over the time of the project 1.2 million, we would go quite in depth in relation to the acquittal. So we would need to be able to see how the funds have been broken up, where they've been spent, proof of expenditure, and how that then relates to the delivery of the project thereof. So my view would be is that yes, that would absolutely be included there. For that to be prescriptive within a resolution of the council, there are no issues with that, but there are a number of elements to the prescribed requirements for this project now from the council. If there's more, we're happy to receive it as officers, and we'll deliver that exactly as the council is requesting.
So seeing as you're not familiar with the specifics of this project, perhaps Kim online, or I don't know whether anybody else at the table might be able to answer the elements of that question with regards to this project specifically, as to the detail required in the project agreement.
Through the chair to the CEO, I do notice Trent is in the gallery. He may be able to answer some questions regarding the funding acquittal.
Trent, thank you. Thank you, Trent.
Through the chair, in regards to the funding acquittal and the regular reports that come through, we haven't, as I'm aware, gone through the detail of actually looking at the individual transactions of them. They provide us with a financial report, similar to other funding acquittals that we get through our grants program. So now if we were to request that, as the CEO mentioned, it's no different to other previous ad hoc requests that we do on interim audits for funding requests, it is possible.
Thank you.
So in essence, that's how you would see this as an audit of the acquittal process.
Through the chair, yes, it would be, yes. So, and it's a similar process to what would happen for funding requests that are granted to us, where we are the grantee for a state or federal funding arrangement. We provide our expenditure to them, and we may get audited on time to time to provide the detail behind that. And it's a request that would come through.
Thank you. And just one last question with regards to the funding acquittal. There are 3 payment milestones over the course of the agreement. Have we met all those milestones, Mr. Chair? Are you able to answer that? Or
I can comment on that.
Kim's online. Thanks.
So you're correct, there are 3 payments specified in the agreement under Section 7 of the agreement. Those payments are linked to achieving the measurable outcomes listed in Schedule A of the agreement. To date, Council has only paid 1 payment, which is the commencement payment. The other 3 payments have not yet been paid because the measurable outcomes of the state permit has not yet been achieved.
Thank you.
So I've got a question. I think, Kim, you'd be the only one who could answer it. And I'm not sure if you've had prior exposure to the amendments in front of us. On the surface, they appear to be a restatement of procedure under our policies and grants forms. Is there anything in there that you are seeing that would be in conflict with the terms of the current agreement, or anything that would require a higher level of disclosure or a higher amount of work? Is it something that would be perceived to be just a natural part of the current agreement?
Well, Stockwell, I haven't seen the exact wording of the motion amendment on the table, so I would probably need to have further consideration of that. What I would say though is the agreement that that Council put in place, the alliance agreement, was established with legal advice. Both this Council had an independent legal firm help draft that. TNC also had a legal firm review it from their perspective. Our corporate finance manager and corporate services director had input into the funding and financial reporting requirements. And it was determined that the alliance agreement was robust, rigorous, and had enough checks and balances and accountabilities for this project.
I just have a question. With regards to that, the point I'm trying to highlight for efficiency is a part of the form that you sent me today, the example form for the procurement. There is a line in there that says, if council wishes to have further information around receipts and financials, if council wishes, we can ask. So mainly that's what I'm focusing on. I'm not asking for, is the contract secure? I'm not questioning how the contract came about. I'm not a legal person. I respect that. I'm just asking us to activate a part of the said contract. Do you think that's agreeable?
Well, as part of the annual reporting and 6-monthly reporting, TNC are required to report on all expenditure, which they do. They also report on all contracts and list all the contracts that have been undertaken and payments associated with those contracts for that reporting period. So that information is provided at both the 6-monthly and annual reports already.
If I ask council to provide those forms with what's already been paid, is the actual receipts and down to the last cent, as per other grant recipients of council monies have to provide, will I be able to find that?
Councillor Finzo, you've been provided with all the annual reports and 6-monthly reports. They're all on public record, and I've provided them to all councillors again today. And at the back of each of those 6-monthly and annual reports lists all the financials, all the expenditure against every aspect of the project, and again also lists the contracts that have been awarded and the amount that's been awarded and whether or not it's been paid or it's still pending or it's still ongoing for that reporting period.
Kim, just on that, I think I asked this question on Tuesday. I'm looking at the annual report 14th of September 2020. It was annual report number 1 on page 26, just under the total project expenditure. And you're right, it outlines community engagement, volunteering and media, that $177,722 has been spent, and it says, and this is the level of detail it provides, community engagement products, engagement coordination, subcontractor identification, contracting and management, volunteer briefings, volunteer recruitment, stakeholder meetings, personal protective equipment, media statements, media management, education material. So I guess can we dive? I guess Councillor Finzel's question is: do we dive any deeper into that? Who engaged the media? What were the media statements? When did they engage it? Who's the media company? Community engagement products. Well, what's a community engagement product? Subcontractor identification. I don't know what that means. So I guess that's the question. Can we deep dive further into information such as that, which has been provided in those annual reports?
Council can request TNC provide further information on any information that's part of a collaborative arrangement. We've got a great working relationship with TNC, so we can definitely request that information. I would, going back to Councillor Stockwell's original question, I would say though that the Partnership Alliance Funding Agreement does outline quite specifically that the purchase of goods, contracts, awarding, procurement for each party is to be done under their own organisational policies, procedures. So that was part of the original agreement. So it was understood that TNC would be procuring, purchasing, making payments, and that they would follow their own organisational procedures, as would we.
I guess, Kim, though, I mean, it's all our documents that, they're a matter of public record. They have to be. We're a council. Is it feasible that, when we are putting $1.2 million into an alliance, a partnership, that I guess that information is able to be obtained with further detail, which I think, because I was quite unsure about what, as I said, some of those statements even meant. Oh, sorry. Just a question. Is that possible to get that further information? And if TNC say no, what recourse do we have?
Dispute resolution. Through the mayor, we can ask.
Is that an unfair inference of TNC?
No, I'm just asking, like, if because Kim said if they say yes, fantastic, that's great. I'm just, the possibility, worst case scenario, is if they say, look, no, there's confidentiality associated with all those sort of things. What happens then?
Director, CEO, I'll take this question, and councillors, to assist you with your decision making with this particular amendment that you have before you. It is quoting the specific clause of the funding agreement that's allowing both parties at any time to have the ability to be able to request variations or further information from each other. So that ability is there, and would not be, I believe, would not be unreasonably withheld by either party to be able to do that. Again, as we said, this is prescriptive. Officers, I think, would have no issues in being able to look at this, and as the Director of Corporate Services said, that it draws more towards an audit. But if this is the view of the majority of the council to be able to get this additional information to be able to activate clause 20.4.2 of the agreement, then by all means, please, we can absolutely do that for you. But that is something that, to help assist, we can go ahead and we could deliver this.
And just to put it on record, I have no doubt that I'm sure TNC, it's a partnership, it's an alliance, would have absolutely no problem. My question just was, what happens and what's the process?
Sorry, Madam Chair, are you speaking towards the motion, or are you asking a question?
My position, just to make it clear, but I'm sure that they would be very forthcoming because it is an alliance. Thank you. Karen, you're the only one who's spoken to this. Would anyone else like to speak to it? Councillor Lawrence.
I'll speak to the motion. The amendment. As the amendment states really clearly in F, clause 20.42, amendments to this agreement may be proposed at any time in writing to the other party. The terms of any amendments shall be negotiated by appointed contact officers and given effect by written agreement signed by both parties. That clause was agreed to by all the parties. So the intent and essence of this amendment is simply to activate, to do exactly what the parties agreed to have included as part of their arrangement. So I see no, I think this is a reasonable request, and I support the amendment.
Can I just ask the question, have we just heard that F is already in the alliance agreement?
That's what I've understood.
So why do we need that if it's already in the alliance agreement? It's already mandated as part of the alliance agreement. It's already in effect. Why is it? It just seems superfluous for me.
Can I try and answer that? Because the level of detail being requested here is beyond what's in the reporting. It's down to an audit level of supplier, contractor, receiver, funds and receipts. That's my understanding. Is that correct, Councillor?
Yes, I raised this simply because today, when I was asking for the process and trying to identify how the acquittal process is in the organisation, I was sent the forms. What are they called?
Procurement.
Yeah, the procurement forms. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. And it was reading those documents to inform myself around the decision that I saw this clause, and I thought, well, let's activate that, because in my opinion, that provides deeper information that may help alleviate concerns in the community around the project. My intent is only to provide further information to inform community so that we can try and put to rest the concerns that people have. There is no other intent, and I used a mechanism already readily available and approved through the contract by legal parties, and everyone agreed. I'm only pulling on a mechanism, in my opinion, that is available. And And I'm asking to authorise the CEO as per the clause. That is my only intent, to dig down a bit deeper, to get the monies to just try and allay and provide further information for questions arising around this project.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else?
I think, could you scroll to the original motion? I want to see, I think it'd be C or B.
Keep going.
No, that's the one.
C.
No, it's B.
Mm-hmm. I think it's all part of that.
So the problem with the amendment is it's cumbersome. Item, if you go back to the amendment, how things are, yeah, I am, yeah. Is that F is just providing us with the clause under which B will be done, so it's not new. And G and H are saying the same thing, except maybe H adds in future agreements, and, and to me, I can't. While you know, it as a motion, it probably doesn't rise and fall on the repetitive nature of some of it. That's the problem with it, is it's not clear. And so it's hard not to say, well, let's work on this a bit more, but I also wonder whether G and H aren't also really part of what D said, which was to review procurement and audit stuff. But it's in essence, in terms of asking to comply with our acquittal policy to a greater level of detail, as long as we're not asking for every paperclip, etc. I think from my experiences, there's probably a limit to which you have to provide receipts for in terms of value. I haven't got any great objection, but I just think that F and G may be superfluous.
Look, I think it's always good to err on the side of caution, and it may very well be superfluous, Councillor Stockwell, but I think it's good to have up there. We always take exactly what's written incredibly important, and it guides us going forward and guides the councillors and our council staff. I support this amendment. Again, I think it just adds weight, and it can only be in the best interests of all involved. Thank you, Councillor Finsel. I know that there was a lot of work in regard to this. This is the first we've all seen of it, but I certainly support it. And yeah, I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you. The amendment.
Yeah, I tend to concur with Councillor Stockwell, and I've usually not supported superfluous motions that are conducted above. But as this actually details the type of the element of detail that Councillor Finsel is trying to drill down to, and the essence of that is an audit on the financials, and an audit is not is in keeping with the agreement. I have no problem supporting the amendment. I do have trouble with the elements of wording too, with regard to potential repetition of what we've already said. But as it drills, as I said, as it drills down to the details and specifics of what is requested, I'm prepared to support.
Look, I think it's largely superfluous. We've got section D, which is involving a review of the procurement and administrative processes. This, we can already do a lot of that under the current agreement. I just see it as superfluous. Staff have a lot of work to do already. I just do not see the need for that particular amendment when that information could be gained under the current arrangements.
Yeah, I think it's over the top. I mean, we've asked the CEO to have a good look at this above, and this is like drilling down further. I worry, like, are we setting a terrible example for Noosa as as a no-go zone for partnerships and projects in the future. I mean, we have the Olympics coming. We are going to want to have partnerships with all sorts of things. We're trying to promote social housing. We're working on the various alliance with the arts. This is now who we are and how we drill down and the level of scrutiny. I mean, it's one thing for transparency, and it's another thing for having a reputation for unbelievable scrutiny in record keeping and going down and then changing from council to council, saying, oh well, okay, wait a minute, we're gonna drill down so hard that I think that if the Nature Conservancy is watching us tonight, I wouldn't be surprised if they took their millions of dollars and left, and their reputation for being a place to come and have partnerships with the Noosa Council will be in tatters. That's my worry. I voice it because we want to be a council that can work with other big groups like the Nature Conservancy, and I just have a very strong feeling like this is going to put a chilling effect on those further negotiations and partnerships in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Wagner. Does anyone else like? I think everyone's spoken to it. Councillor Winslow, would you like to? No, close. We'll put the amendment to a vote. All in favour?
Look, Stuart.
Oh yes.
Sorry, the amendment refers to the wrong clause in the agreement.
Hello?
Do you want to correct that? It's 20.5, not 20.4.2.
Yeah, we better. Thank you.
And I've just extracted that from Council's document register, so I'm reading it, so I've pointed that out to
Can we do that on the run here, or do we have to turn around and actually vote this down?
Well, we better check the document.
We can
You can't change it.
We can't change it.
I've got the executed agreement in front of me.
Yeah, I know, it's just the standing orders doesn't allow you, once it's been moved and seconded. I could double check, but it used to be.
In the interest of accuracy, I mean, it was just quoting the wrong clause.
Would it not be technical? It's very technical.
Would it not be with the approval of the?
Well, that's what it used to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go with it, don't. It's not going. No one's going to.
Well, we're only going to re-prosecute and go through it all again. So.
Change it to 20.5.
You happy with
okay
that?
to do that?
Well, I'd have to read the contract.
The officers are advising.
Okay, yeah, sure, that's fine. Thank you.
And I'm
Thanks,
happy
Sean.
with that too on the seconder.
So with the approval of the mover and the
So 20
seconder.
point.
What is it, 20.5?
To confirm?
Correct.
20.5?
Was 20.5.
Okay.
20.5,
I asked Kim to
20.5.
I was looking at that thinking this is a bit crooked.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Sean. That motion is.
Hey,
Oh,
so
beg your
put the
pardon.
vote
Don't put it to a vote yet.
Put the
Goodness me. We'll put it to a vote. All in favour. Councillors Drusevich, Councillors Finzel, Lauriston and Stewart against. Councillor Stockwell, Councillor Wagner and Councillor Wilkie. Amendment is carried. That brings us back to the substandard motion.
Okay, I just need to add in this. Just a second.
We'll give you a minute, Melinda.
Yes, please.
Oh, okay.
Is it?
Just in terms of it, I know there was one thing changed. It had to be the agreement of council to change that motion.
The council.
Yeah.
We did it.
So it's shall not be withdrawn or modified without consent of the mover, seconder, and council.
So just confirm that everyone, we have changed 20.4 to 20.5 on recommendation of staff, being the correct clause. Speak now on a vote, please.
I just have to get it. So it should be okay now.
Are you okay, Linda?
Yeah, I'm just going to take this. That's the final one now.
There's the final, yes, standard motion.
Yep. Yeah. Eight parts.
Hey.
Eight parts.
Okay. We'll put the standard motion. We've got no
No,
more
we haven't
amendments.
yet. No, we haven't talked
Haven't
about it
spoken
yet.
to it yet.
The only person who has spoken to it is Councillor Wilkie. And Councillor Stock, would you like to talk?
I will.
Just to address some statements in debate that I believe are things that should be reviewed and perhaps challenged. So there was one statement made that in Monday's committee meeting that there was a comment that major risk that there is a major risk that is going to fail. That didn't occur on Monday at all. Tuesday. There was an acknowledgement that any project in the river is subject to risk, and any ecosystem rehabilitation. The extent of that risk has been heavily modified by the extent of science and design and world experts involved in this process. So the confidence level and the risk is not one that I consider to be major. The other one, which was quite amusing, was the suggestion that because a business organisation writes to council with the view that they've canvassed the views of all their members, the suggestion that 1,100 businesses support that position is laughable. Only today I've talked to one person involved in the business group who had a diametrically opposed view. This was a lobbying campaign. It was organised by a select group to try and derail a project. It's perfectly legitimate, but let's call it for what it is. It's an organised lobbying campaign to derail a project from entities within this Shire. Their ability to talk on behalf of all their members will reflect the amount of consultation they did with their members. I'll stand to be corrected if each one of them had consulted and got a majority view in their deliberations. I think it's important to understand that when we look at what our visitors want in terms of TripAdvisor, that the Noosa River is number 3. The beach, the national park, the river. It's clear it is one of the Shire's greatest economic assets. It's clear from the science that its biodiversity, abundance of fish and other river species is in significant decline. It is clear that if we don't do anything, that will get worse with the impacts of climate change, and that the benefits that many generations before now have enjoyed by being able to catch a fish, a variety of fish, a size of fish, will decrease. And this project seeks to address that. It seeks to make one small step back towards the abundant ecosystem that this place enjoyed for tens of thousands of years since the river stopped being a wetland and started being a river when the last ice age was over. Under custodianship of the traditional owners, oysters were central to the local culture. And we can't stand up here and say we want to do reconciliation plans and to acknowledge the traditional owners if we don't respect one of their key aspects of their culture, and they support this project. Really important to understand. It has to be you're willing to invest in those words. So this project is an excellent project. It's coming under more scrutiny than previously. I wish that I'm confident that within weeks we will have approvals, and within months we'll have the restoration works commencing. I look forward to that day. I look forward to the reports in 10 and 20 years' time of the benefits flowing from it.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwood. Anyone else like to speak to the substantive motion? Councillor Joe.
Yeah, well, there's an element that I didn't mention the other day, and I think it's pertinent to mention, and that's the element of structure in the river. I talked about Ural and ringtail forest, comparing a land-based restoration project with a water-based restoration project. One of the elements that any fisherman knows, and that anybody who likes oysters know, is that what they appreciate is structure. You won't find oysters on a seabed just sitting there lying around. They need structure. They need reef. One of the reasons that you see old vessels being sunk out in the ocean is to create structure for fish habitat, for fish growth, for fish development. Where do all of our fishermen go offshore? They go to the reefs. Structure, where you find fish, where you find oysters, where you find corals, where you find all of those elements that we're talking about being able to restore here in the river. Without structure, we won't see those elements being restored in the river. We won't see those elements increasing in the river. Because over years, that structure has been removed. And that's the point of all of the studies that have been undertaken and what they've told us. That without structure, that's why they're gone. And I've seen the essences of crushed oyster shells and where they've been used around the Shire in the past, historically. And what they've been used for. And that's the, you know, the proof is in the pudding. But the proof in the pudding as a fisherman is, where do I throw my line? I don't throw my line in the water, I throw it towards structure. I look for the tree that has fallen, the branch that's in there, the structure that's in the river that the fish congregate to. I look at the rock that has been that is there, either man-made or has been there for eternity. And I see that structure has crustacean going on. I see bivalves. I see all the essences of marine life around structure. And what this project is ultimately about is the restoration of structure so that marine life can thrive. Marine life thrives on structure. Places for small fish to hide. It's food sources. It's algae that grow on there. It's all of those elements that you can't have without that structure. So for me, this project is a no-brainer. There is no way it can fail. I've seen fish, crabs, crustaceans, bivalves, all of it, on tyres that have been disposed. I've seen it on rubbish. I've seen hermit crabs take up the essence of broken bottles. I've seen fish live in waste and structure. They all provide a form of habitat and structure. So if we provide good structure, well thought out and processed structure, based on 30 years of science and understanding of oyster restoration projects, we will restore fish habitat. We will restore oysters to the Noosa River and continue to grow them and give them the ability and the structure they need to thrive.
Thank you, Councillor Joe. Tom.
I'm going to speak because I want to address some of Councillor Tom's comments because they concern me. You raised two issues and I noted them. First is that what's happening tonight may compromise our relationship with the Nature Conservancy. And the other issue you raised is what we're coming across as, what we represent. Tom, really good points, but I need to also hope that the Nature Conservancy also, if they're listening, also understands or reads maybe something a little bit different. That what's happening here tonight is 3 courageous women that are representing the voice of a community that don't approve this project. I hope that the TNC respect this representation, that we are diverse and courageous. And sometimes we just need to step up. I respect the majority decision of this council. At the end of the day, that's our job, that's our role. But our job is also to understand who we represent and why we're sitting around this table. So I'm hoping that the Nature Conservancy can also understand the other side of this argument.
Thank you. I won't be supporting this motion in full. I will certainly support aspects of it. I think that we've had nearly an hour and a half of debate. I think that the substantive motion is stronger. I think it's better. Thanks to everyone around this table and their input and those amendments made. I support those amendments and I support the inclusion. At the end of the day, this is still a project, and the substantive motion before us is, can you please go down, Alinda? Just to, yeah. Authorise the CEO to commence negotiations with the Nature Conservancy regarding the Noosa River Restoration Alliance and report back. That's something I can't support because at the end of the day, it's still a risk. It's a risk to $1.2 million of ratepayer monies. We heard tonight that if we wanted to start this project tomorrow, we can't because we still don't have the necessary, perhaps it's only one and we're waiting on the operational works as an addition, but we still can't start that project tomorrow. The opportunity costs are significant. I mentioned on Tuesday what we could use, and we have to think about this 1.2 million or the 900 or whatever it is that's left of what we could do. All environmental projects, all things that will help our river system. As Councillor Wilkie said, it is so important. It is what our visitors love to see. It's our rivers, it's our beaches, it's our national parks, it's all our environmental assets. But we can do things such as bring forward the contemporary watering monitoring program for 2022-23. We can expand the King sediment management and revegetation program, which is a key polluter to the Noosa River. We can fund a major urban stormwater management program, which is also a key polluter. We can obtain information and key evidence around concerns regarding Burgess Creek. We know the concerns that the community have around that. We can analyse these issues in regard to that creek in conjunction with Unity Water. See, and none of that is, in my opinion, risking the success or failure of a project. That is something that can be started immediately. We don't have to wait for any permits. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. CEO, for any of those projects. There's something that we can, as a council, get on with. We can use our ratepayer money. We can get bang for your buck straight away. So that's why, in regard to this project, I still believe there are risks associated. I still believe there has been long delays, and although we're potentially close to getting that permit, we can't start the project tomorrow. Can we start it next week? Can we start it next month? I'm not sure. And it is around, there are infinite projects we could do with finite expenditure. I'd like to see that finite expenditure or monies go to projects that, as I said, that can begin immediately and can help our environment immediately. So as it stands in its full motion, I won't be supporting it because of paragraph B.
Questions? Mr. CEO, might be authorised to commence negotiations, but can you complete negotiations before those permits have been issued?
Through the Mayor, Councillor Juricevich, my understanding is that the last permit is well progressed, is the advice that I've received, and it is in a draft format. We haven't received that, but this work we'll endeavour to do all that we can, but we are waiting on the state government, and concurrently council is undertaking its operational works approval process from there. So we would basically 3 processes will be undertaken. Waiting for the state government to finalise the final permit, operational works that will go through a separate and independent process through our development planning and assessment team, and then should this become the resolved position of the council, undertaking all of the requirements that we have within the motion that is before us at the moment. So there could be some timing between. We may not be able to have this completed by the time all of the permits are provided. But it does authorise me, that item B, to negotiate. And under delegated authority, our team will do their best to get the details forward. As CEO, given the importance and the debate that we've had, I'll have to have my own specific oversight and bring that back to the council table to be able to sign off.
And just to clarify a point raised by the Mayor there in her speech, with regard to work in an area, and I'll probably have to direct this to Sean through the chair. With regard to works in an area like Burgess Creek that involves works through Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service land and the state-controlled beach and all the rest of it, or any other project that involves land that we are only the custodians of, would other projects along those lines require us to get state permits to proceed going forward?
It depends on the exact tenure of the land and the scale of the works. there are a number of operational exemptions that exist for council to do various infrastructure works or operational works. But the larger the project is and the more sensitive the environment is, normally it would also trigger an environmental approval and consents.
Thank you.
Tom, would you like to talk to this?
No.
Karen, would you like to talk to the substantive motion?
Look. It's a real challenge, to say the least. I'll hold my ground again and support a good governance, equity, transparency and continuous improvement at council, with the view of fostering good relations between councillors, staff and community, with the hope of promoting the good working relationships and professionalism, with a view to engender trust and build resilience through the application of aspirations for transformational leadership. Given what has been included tonight in the debate, I am prepared to trust the process and I will vote for this and trust the process, and hopefully the goals towards the aspirational leadership will be seen through this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Wilkie.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, it's been a great debate tonight. It's been robust, it's been extensive, it's really, it's changed the motion before us. We've all had an opportunity to test the veracity of the amendments coming before us. Look, it's clear that the motion is going to be passed, and Noosa Council will still continue to support the Oyster Reef project, and we'll be in partnership. I'm not going to go on about the values and the benefits of the Oyster Reef projects, which are happening around the world. And TNC is leading. That's well established and that's clear. What I will say, it's been the democratic process that these amendments have been passed, and there's a multi-part motion before us. I'm going to respect that that's the collective wish of this table. I am really moved that Councillor Finzel is also going to trust and respect the democratic process and vote in favour of the substantive motion. That's all we can ask for, that we act in good faith when we're around this table. And I believe each and everybody is for their own specific reasons, and I mean that. It's not easy to be in an adversarial position with contrary views on an issue like this where a lot is at stake on either side. So I respect each and every councillor around the table for their contribution here tonight, and I will of course be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. We can put it to a vote. All in favour. Councillors Grusovic, Stockwell, Wegner, Finzel, Wilkie against. Councillors Lawrence and Stewart. Motion, substantive motion is passed. Would anyone like a comfort break?
Yes, please.
We might have a 5-minute comfort break. Thank you.
It's not an hour, then it'll be closer to my time.
So
Report 7, further report.
move to open the meeting.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
Sure.
So you'll need to move to open, and we'll need a seconder.
Yeah, I'll second.
Second,
Thank
Wilkie,
you.
thank you. We'll get. We're ready. We are ready to 7:35.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I move to reopen the meeting.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. All in favour?
That's
Unanimous.
unanimous.
Thank you. We are now back. Item number 7 on our agendas is the further report for a material change of use application for a roadside stall at 201 Mary River Road, COOROY. Report 8. Application for reconfiguration of a lot, 1 into 8 lots at 60 GLENRIDGE Drive, COOROIBAH. Councillor Lauriston.
I, Councillor Lawrenson, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter due to my personal relationship with the applicant Mark Bain and the Bain family, who are family friends. We have attended social events together and our children have attended school together. As a result of my conflict, I will leave the meeting room while the matter is considered and voted.
Thank you, Councillor Lauriston.
I'm happy to move the revised motion, and I'll read it out because it was not the same as was in the agenda, and that council note the report by the development planner to the general committee meeting dated 19th of April 2022 regarding application number RAL 210033 for a reconfiguring of a lot 1 into 8 lots at GLENRIDGE Drive, COOROIBAH, and note the applicant has stopped the decision period pursuant to the Planning Act.
I'll second that. Thank you, Councillor.
No need to talk.
Yes, lovely, thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this? All right, I'll put the motion to a vote. All in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, Alinda. Scott, could you please go again?
I can do. Yep. Thank you, ma'am.
We need new chairs to bounce us up out of the chairs so into the standing position.
Or a little shock.
Well, I like the way you think. Yes. Sprung. Absolutely sprung.
Thank you. Welcome back, Councillor. All right, we won't ask the Councillor any questions. All right, item number 9, report 9, Phrygian Beach Surf Lifesaving Club lease request. Councillor Winston.
I just, in our marathon general meeting the other day, I forgot to acknowledge the community groups that played an integral part.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Point of order. The motion hasn't been moved or seconded. It appears the councillor is speaking to the motion.
Sorry, excuse me. Yes, I would.
Yes, I'll
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll make this very brief. I just want to take the opportunity to thank personally the community groups that help revive the Phrygian Beach Surf Club. Their tireless efforts need to be recognised and applauded, and I missed the opportunity to thank them at the general meeting, so I'm just taking this opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence.
Off you.
No.
I did thank them at the general meeting.
I didn't.
But I take the opportunity to say, here, I can do.
Thank you, Joe. Yes, I'd like to reinforce that too. It has been a great community effort, great collaboration, and I'm really excited to see what the Phrygian Beach New Surf Lifesaving Club will deliver over the next 10 years. I think it will deliver, if anything the last 3 years to go by, it will deliver great things. So this is a great day. Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to close?
No, thank you.
We'll put the matter to a vote. All in favour? That is unanimous. Thanks, Linda. Item 10, or report 10, is Financial Performance Report, March 2022.
Move the general committee recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkins. Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. All in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, Linda. We're now up to item 9 on page 29 of the agenda. We have one report direct to the ordinary meeting, and that is a further report for operational work prescribed title works at 10 to 12 Ravenwood Drive, Noosa Heads. We have our Manager of Development Assessment, Kerry, here. Thank you, Kerry. Could you give us a summary of this new report, please, Kerry?
Yes, this follows on from discussions at General Committee where councillors requested an alternative motion for approval of the jetty with conditions, as well as some additional details around what happened at the time this jetty was built in 1995, as well as written advice from the neighbours at 8 Ravenwood Place. So a motion has been prepared for council for approval if council would like to approve this application tonight. The additional information that we have found is that an environmental health officer appears to have undertaken an inspection of the jetty in 1995, and the comment on the file is okay. So pretty limited detail, obviously going back some years ago as to what, but it certainly, the message was okay at the time. Just reviewing the conditions of approval for the jetty, I find that difficult that the officer has concluded that at the time, because it appears to me contrary to the conditions of approval. Nevertheless, there was the notation on the file of okay. The neighbours at 8 Ravenwood Place, who are impacted by this jetty and the additional length, have indicated they're pleased to see the jet ski removed, which is proposed by the applicant, but they wish for the jetty to be modified and reduced in length, because it has impacted their plans to build their own separate jetty extending out from their property. So they feel that because their jetty was not constructed in accordance with the approved plans, it's reasonable for council to ask the applicant to modify the jetty as built. So their recommendation to council still remains the same, and that is that council refuse the application because it is contrary to the planning scheme, and this jetty impacts on the space of the neighbour next door, 8 Ravenwood Place.
The water that the jetty goes in, the water that the jetty goes into is public property. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Sorry, Tom, did you ask that question?
Just the water that the water that the jetty goes into is public property, not private property. It's public property. And I'll just speak to the motion.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Nobody's moved it. Yeah.
Which are we moving or seconding? The approval or the refusal?
This is for approval, Harry. Is that correct? That's
the recommendation is for refusal, but our officers have prepared an alternative motion for approval should council wish to.
Thank you.
Which one are you moving to?
Well,
The refusal.
I'll move the refusal.
Thank you, councillor.
And
Oh,
I'll second it.
Thank you.
I will move it because the jetty goes into public property. Goes 3 meters into public property, and as I've said before, my policy is you can't have a private enterprise going into public without an overwhelming public interest. And it may seem unfair to the applicant, but to me it's not an overwhelming public interest to allow private property to go into public property.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor, anyone else like to speak to the?
I will. Any jetty will go into the orders of the state, and what this as constructed, has gone into the orders of the state contrary to the approval of the original conditions, which stipulated a boundary within that state waters that honours convention, and the convention is set up in a way that it provides a form of equity to each owner fronting a canal or a waterway. In this case, we've seen that it wasn't built in accordance with the approval at the time. It is built in a way that does impact on the envelope that is generally provided or agreed to by the state for the neighbouring property. The neighbouring property has indicated that it is still their desire to ensure the neighbour's jetty is within that accepted norm. Understanding that, you know, the passage of time and perhaps a lackadaisical inspection back in the 90s has complicated this matter. I still think we have to consider it on its merits, and that is, we've got an application today for a jetty that doesn't comply with the accepted norm for jetties in state waters.
Can I just ask a question? There is a lot of ambiguity around the environmental health officer and what was found, and it said okay on the document. I understand this is a long time ago, it's hard. So with that okay, would that mean the person in question would have gone, looked at the jetty, perhaps not had the plans with him, said, oh, that looks okay, come back and put it on the file as okay? I'm not sure, I'm just wondering how, you know, would they have had to inspect the jetty as it was in its finished form to then write the okay?
The file reads as though there was an inspection by the officer, but I don't have any other detail. It just says okay.
And the plans, I guess, when you look at the plans in their original format, they actually are the same shape, aren't they? I mean, it may not be, obviously it's longer, but if you were to do a quick look, and I guess you're not an expert or you're in a hurry, you could mistake it as, oh, that looks right, okay.
Yes, it could well have happened that way. They may not have measured it up and it's the same shape, it's just 3 metres longer, and so they may not have picked it up on their inspection. That's how it appears to me, and why they've signed it as okay.
I'll speak to the motion. We've got a 1995 approval that says it's okay. We've also got a state assessment and a referral agency, SARA, that set out conditions of approval. And I won't talk to all the conditions, but I will highlight a couple. That the structure allows for the safe navigation of other ships or restricts safe access to or from neighbouring structures. It does. I think all the councillors were privy to some information from the applicant's town planner, which clearly shows that safe navigation is possible and safe access is possible. So, in my opinion, it's just not fair, reasonable or equitable to then therefore request a jetty to be modified, given A, that it's got a 1995 approval, given B, that the State Assessment and Referral Agency have also given it approval, subject to conditions, which the jetty complies with. So it's, in my opinion, not fair, reasonable and equitable to request that the jetty be modified. And it's also not fair, reasonable and equitable to request an applicant to undertake regular dredging. I'm also concerned that we may be also opening ourselves up to legal challenge. For this reason, I won't be supporting the refusal.
I concur with what Councillor Lawrenson said. I won't be supporting the refusal for that. We do have that document, however, we're not sure of the circumstances that arrived. We have a document that says the word okay. The applicants are getting rid of their their jet ski construction. That will be removed, and that is in good faith for the neighbour. I know that was something the neighbour requested. The concerns I have was that the people who have purchased the property will be unduly under duress if they have to remove it through no fault of their own. As I said, the approval, despite how it got there, when it got there, how it got there, or why, it says okay, and that's the only piece of evidence we have to go by, so we have to take it on face value. Similarly, if they were to remove the jetty or be required to bring it back, we have seen that there is minimal water flow. It would actually be banked, any boat, and it would be pretty much non-feasible, non-usable, non-workable, and that to actually make it work, they would require a quarterly or after every significant weather event, some form of dredging, which again could cost a considerable amount of money, which again causes undue stress and costings on the applicant, who really is in many ways the innocent party in all of this. We have seen that the state, they looked at the safety, and they had the 7 conditions imposed, and they were happy with that to proceed as long as those conditions were adhered with. A concern that we had on Tuesday, and one which we've all seen aerial footage of now, was that whether or not that number 8 would have access to their jetty with a bigger boat. And we have seen aerial footage that 2 pontoon boats side by side can actually quite happily live there together. So they're not just constrained with a small tinny, they can actually get a much bigger boat in. So their access isn't constrained in regard to a very small boat. So I also too am concerned about potential legal implications if we refuse this on the basis of the evidence before us. So I won't be supporting the recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Just a question, Kerry. They have a 1994 approval. 95
yeah.
approval. So the owners at that time were given an approval from 94 were given an approval from the council, correct? But it's contrary, the approval they were given by council staff was contrary to what was permitted there. Is that correct? Why is the approval consistent with what sort of structure that should be permitted at the end of that?
The approved plans show a similar shaped jetty to what we're currently considering, but the approved plans were 6 metres long. The current plans are 9 metres, so they did not build the jetty in accordance with the approved plans. It's 3 metres longer.
That's what I thought. So they don't actually have a 1995 approval for the jetty in its current form.
No, that's right.
Thank you.
Question. Does the 1995 approval still stand?
Interesting question.
It is not a development approval under the Planning Act, so it's not a continuing approval. Because it was under a local law, I believe, and a policy.
So the application before us today is a planning approval, which should be assessed on the criteria for planning as it exists today, and therefore the appeal would be against the application being refused on current day's conditions. Is that correct?
That's correct. It would be it is a bound assessment against the current planning scheme codes.
So the structure that's actually there is still inconsistent with what the codes were back in '94 as well.
Yes, that's right. It's inconsistent with the policy at the time, back in 1994. What's there?
So it never had an approval.
What's there never had an approval. That's right.
Concerning the sand, is there evidence that there's been a sand buildup underneath the dock since that time?
Can I answer that? Because I've actually asked the question of the occupant with regard to that, and as to whether any dredging has actually taken place with the current structure as it is. And the response I received from OG Strategic was, I have checked with the owners and they have advised they have had to dredge twice in the period of their ownership in 6 years, in the current format.
Kerry, in regards to the 1994 approval, is it possible that an approval was okayed and the oversight, the extra 3 metres, wasn't picked up?
Well, I think that's what we've said. You know, the notes on the file indicate that there appears to be an inspection, a site inspection, and then the note just says okay. I guess my advice to you is that I don't consider that the officer has picked up that it didn't match the approved plans, because the conditions in that approval were fairly specific around the approved plans.
So, according to the owner in 1994, the jetty as constructed was lawful. If that wasn't picked up, he's got a certificate saying that it was approved.
No certificate was issued. He has no certificate, but I understand that an owner may well assume that if a council officer has said okay. Correct.
If the owner that brought this to our attention now has a dock, but if that dock is destroyed or something and they want to put a dock on their own property, would they have grounds for a legal battle with us for approving it? If we do approve it, would they have a legal argument against us for approving something that actually blocks the dock, blocks them from having a dock from their own land?
Well, I think there is an avenue in terms of good governance to make that sort of appeal. There can be an application for a declaration into the Planning and Environment Court that approval given by council is so, no reasonable council would have given that approval, but that's a very hard test to make. So I would suggest that there's not much of a legal avenue for the owners of 8 Ravenwood to make that sort of application if council approves this application before them today.
And Kerry, Kerry, from I guess what we've seen, the aerial footage, they're not blocked, are they? I mean, when the photo that they can fit a pontoon boat on in and out, and they can get in and out of their actual waterfront property with the jetty as it currently stands.
The owners of 8 Ravenwood approached council some time ago. That's how we became aware of this. They wished to build a jetty out from their property, and through that process we became aware that what was built next door was non-compliant with the approved plans. So it does prevent them from building a jetty directly out from their property. It's not really possible given the configuration of this jetty. They have chosen to share with the neighbour and build a shared jetty with the neighbour on the other side, but that's not what they wanted to do. And the email we've received from the owner for the purpose of this council meeting is their preference would be for the jetty to be modified because they still wish to have their own jetty in front of their property.
Yeah, so
I think that's a stopper.
We're dealing with a refusal of operational works. The question is, can we approve legally if councils want to, considering it's only an operational works approval that doesn't meet a performance outcome in the Waterways Works Code. So the Waterways Work Code under P09, the 2 relevant conditions it's not meeting is prescribed title works are designed and sited to ensure A, they are contained within the prolongation of the boundaries of the lot, and B, that when a vessel is berthed it does not encroach over the prolongation of the boundaries of the lot. If it doesn't meet a performance outcome, is there a higher level of application required?
If a development doesn't meet the specific outcome of code, you go to the overall outcomes of the code and test it against those overall outcomes.
So you can still do that as an operational works, it doesn't reflect a high level?
Yes, and the Planning Act allows with a code assessment for an application to be approved despite some non-compliances with a code.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I was trying to absorb.
Yeah, the Planning Act for a code assessable application allows council to approve an application where there are some non-compliances with a code. So council is not prohibited legally from doing so.
Kerry, in terms of encroachment over boundary lines, how far does the jetty actually encroach in number 8 Ravenwood's boundary?
Sorry, can we just get the image up as well?
I'm not sure. I have some measurements for you tonight. But we can have a look at on the
Is
aerials.
it major or minor is probably where I'm going with. My computer's shut down. I think I had that information somewhere. Yeah.
Which image are you talking about? One we had
in the Planning and Environment Agenda on page 75, there's an aerial. Well, I think of it as quite major because it prevents the people, the owners of 8 Ravenwood, from building a jetty out directly from their property. So I would consider it major. I don't know the measurements though, Councillor Miller.
Yeah. And as I said, and just
page 75.
I'm gathering from the response from the owners of 8 Ravenwood that the element of the jetty that they've constructed at the moment may not be the final outcome that they were trying to achieve in their original intent with the jetty, and this may be a compromise or maybe an interim jetty until this is resolved. Would that be fair to say? Is that your understanding from speaking with the applicant? Sorry, the owner, the next door owner.
Yes, it's not their first preference in what they wanted to construct on the site. Whether, if council refuses this application and the jetty is modified, they proceed to do a different jetty, well, I'm not sure.
So Kerry, the jetty that we see where the grass is, that's a shared jetty between 8 and the neighbour on the left.
That's correct.
And so they constructed that, but that wasn't their first preference.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. And they constructed that after they had moved in and they knew the constraints when they, well, I guess that's a hard question for you to ask, but that the jetty has been there, the jetty on the right that we're debating has been there since the early 90s, and the owners of that is a more recently constructed jetty, so they, I guess, would have been aware of the jetty next door when they were purchasing the house and constructing.
Yes, that's correct.
So Kerry, on page 75, and I may be misreading this, I've got, it's encroaches the boundary by 0.17. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Sorry, I'm just not sure where you're.
Have a look at the diagram there. It shows the 0.17.
Oh, okay.
Corner of it.
So is that the encroachment area, 0.17?
No.
So
that doesn't tell you the whole
no.
story. So
Okay.
typically the prolongation is measured from both boundaries. Oh yes, I'm sorry, this is number 8, so that is correct. Yes. That is correct.
It's only when they park the boat on the boundary, the boat.
That's right.
The boat over.
And that's the issue. By going so close to the boundary, then you have the boat on that side over in, I guess, that water space for number 8.
But the actual encroachment is actually minor then, not major.
I would agree the actual encroachment is minor, but I think the impact is quite significant.
Is that relevant?
It is.
Kerry?
It is for me in that we have setbacks from that prolongation boundary for jetties. So the planning scheme seeks to have 1.5 metre setback from that prolongation to allow, to ensure there's not this conflict occurring and boats aren't crossing over in front of other properties. So whilst it says 0.17, which seems like a minor encroachment, the encroachment is the standard 1.5 metre setback from that prolongation.
So I'm confused. Why did SARA then in their assessment approve the development application? And why did it say, so the reasons for its decision was that the structure allows for the safe navigation of other ships or restricts safe access to or from neighbouring structures. That sort of, I don't know, I feel assured that maybe I've given a lot of weight to the referral agency response.
Yeah.
Is that correct? That's my question.
I think it becomes clearer if we have a look at the referral agency response and their advice in attachment 2, because they are looking at the navigational corridor. So that's the corridor of the canal. They're not looking at the issues between individual properties. And in their advice, they're actually pointing out this issue to council and saying you should give it consideration because it's impacting the amenity for the neighbour. So that the bigger they're looking at the bigger picture in terms of navigational corridor in the canal. They're not looking at individual property issues. They're leaving that for council.
Sorry, are you able to read out that element where you're saying that's what the referral agency said?
Yeah, we did have it ready to put up on the screen, so we can just go to that if you don't want to.
Was that in that attachment?
Yeah.
Right the other day.
Yeah. I can read it, but you may wish to read it yourselves.
It's getting too late.
Who, for me or you?
It'll be like a bedtime story, you put us to sleep.
That one, yeah, that there. So we look at point 3. They specifically make this point. So if you look particularly at the last 2 sentences, it says, whilst this is clear of the navigation corridor, it may impact current and future amenity access to the adjoining property, which is what officers are raising. As recommended, this be considered by council. The assistant manager is council.
Look, just to move this along, I'll speak to the motion. I'm going to support it. I think we really need to fix this problem now. The jetty is not compliant. It's all because there are flow-on effects in the future. It's already caused the 2 adjoining neighbours to come up with a suboptimal solution. What happens when they both sell? They've both got a shared jetty. The next occupant of 8, Ravenwood, may say this is not acceptable to me. I want to press their rights. Will this come back again to the council? The occupant of the adjacent place to number 8 may also not be happy with the arrangement. They may want their own jetty as well. I just think unless the problem's solved at the source for all time into the future, it could keep recurring. And if we don't do the right thing now, I'm not satisfied that the answer is going to be, well, council approved something that was not compliant. I think we should fix the problem at the source here now. I know it's unfortunate for the current owner, but dredging is quite a common practice for jetty owners in these canals, and as is jetty upgrades. And I think one is needed here for the issue of equity for the neighbours. Yeah, I think fix the problem now.
Councillor Finzel or Councillor Joe?
I've been sitting on the jetty on this one. Yeah. That document was the one document I was waiting. I have been waiting to see what approval was given in the past. I'm going to apply the pub test on this one. I understand the elements of things, but something's been in place 28 years. It's probably due for renewal before too long, so there'll be an opportunity for staff to turn around and if they come back and want to revise it then. So there's still scope to pull it back into line when it reaches the end of its lifespan. Being in those canal waters, they're quite often undertaken. The element that I was waiting on was that piece of paper that said okay. I think any reasonable person would expect, as an owner of a property, that was an approval by council, and that the officer had done his due diligence and undertaken a reasonable amount of work to ensure that he's doing his job properly. And whilst the notation is all we've got to go by from 28 years ago, I think it'll hold up. I think it's got the potential to hold up. And so, given those elements of it, and I understand the implications for the owner of number 8 Ravenwood, and I do empathise. There is something they have in place, so they can utilise the canals, and they have got capacity to work there. But even if it is only an interim solution for them, but the notation of OK on that paperwork to me turns around and says that someone did their due diligence, and the owners can reasonably expect they had approval, and that approval, had they done their searches and done their due diligence, would have been approved. So I'm not going to support the refusal.
Can I ask a question, Kerry? If my memory serves me right, in the Pelican hire case, did the judge not rely on notations from notations on council building reports? Why does that, your point, Joe, strikes a chord with me?
I think it might strike a chord with me. I think that's why.
Yeah. I don't recall that. Primarily with the Pelican case that we lost, the judge found that despite council seeking, when they approved that jetty, that there would be sufficient room for boats to moor inside the lease area, we had to acknowledge that there were other size boats that wouldn't have fitted in the lease area, even if the jetty had been built in accordance with the approved plans. So that seemed to be the primary finding, that the judge couldn't reconcile the fact that some boats would have been outside anyway, council, with the jetty that you've approved if it had been built, and so found that they couldn't insist to make someone remodify a jetty when it wasn't going to achieve what council was seeking anyway in full.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Finzel, you haven't spoken.
This is a challenging one. I just think if I look at it objectively, I think each property should have the capacity to support the development of a jetty if the owners so desire now or into the future, without a major impact to the amenity of other users or neighbours. So I will be supporting the staff in their recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Tom.
Yeah. Can we go back to the photos? Go back to page 74 and 75, the two photos in the, yeah, there we go. Could you please go to page 74? When I look at that, it's called the jetty, and I would suspect that when they did that design, there wasn't so much sand, and boats were designed to actually line up with that jetty when they made that original drawing. I think that the sand has accreted beneath the jetty. It's no longer a dock, it's a deck. And if the sand was at that time there where it is now, back then, they would have just built a deck, wouldn't they? It's not a dock at all. So it appears to me the sand has come up, and so in a way that their own real estate, with the sand accruing underneath the dock, they're just gaining real estate, moving out into the water. So when they originally did the drawing, a boat was meant to be able to tie up to that dock, and so when they made the mistake, they gave themselves that. I suggest that they will just have to remake the dock, pull it back, and do the dredging like everybody else. And so I support the refusal, because everybody else has to do dredging, and if they had the dock set to the original standards, they would have had to do the dredging as well. But the dock has just moved; it is out. They've been able to get away with not doing dredging for a very long time, and now getting an extra 3 meters that impacts the neighbours.
Thank you, Councillor. We're going to group to a vote in favour.
Is that for the refusal?
For the refusal, yes, that's Councillors Stockwell, Wegner, Finzel, Wilkie. Against Councillors Brucevic, Lawrence and Stewart. That is carried. We have one report number 2. Yes, and we will return to that. That's a minor change from existing approval for dual occupancy at 1/22 and 2/22 Kingfisher Drive, Phrygian Beach. Councillor Wilkie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter in relation to the application in item 551901. As the applicant, Sharon and Maury Barnes, were on my list of campaign volunteers for the 2020 local government elections. I have no opinion on whether I would like to stay in the room or not. I will respect the decision of the meeting on whether I can remain and participate in the decision.
Thank you. I'll move that Council note the declarable conflict of interest by Councillor Wilkie and determine that it is in the public interest that Councillor Wilkie participates and votes in this matter because Council believes that he does not stand to receive a personal benefit or loss in relation to this matter and does not have a close personal relationship with Sharon and Maury Barnes, and therefore a reasonable person would trust that the final decision is made in the public interest. Can I just thank you, Councillor Stockwell. All in favour? Or any questions for Councillor Wilkie?
Oh,
okay, you know, Karen?
Sorry, what was distracted? Sorry, what are we voting on?
We just Councillor Wilkie to stay in the room.
Oh.
I've moved it. Councillor Stockwell seconded. Do you have any questions for Councillor Wilkie?
No.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
All in favour? That's unanimous. Noting that Councillor.
No, it's not.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Jurcevic, I beg your pardon. Against Councillor Jurcevic. I note that Councillor Wilkie did not vote on this. Thanks, Kath. No, this was where it's a bit confusing. This was just the general committee agenda item to be deferred to the ordinary page, so there was not a further report requested.
Page 15 of the Planning and
That is
Environment
why
Committee
it was somewhat confusing. So Kerry, thank you, I know it. Does
That's right.
Yes.
Deferred.
It was deferred from the general, with no further report. So we have a staff recommendation on page, what was it, 15?
Page 15.
And that is for, oh, thank you, refuse the changes. Any questions? Thanks, Scott. Any questions for Kerry? Councillor, would anyone like to move the staff recommendation?
I'll move it.
Councillor Stockwell, would anyone like to second it?
Oh, I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell.
Okay, we talked around this one a lot on Tuesday, got the day right first time. It boiled down to me that yes, you could argue, if you looked towards the shops on this side, that there may be some argument for a boundary setback relaxation. However, that is, for me, the lesser of the relaxations that this particular proposal is proposing. I think the increase in site cover, plot ratio, I forgot to have that in front of me. The two other issues that were in non-compliance are ones that we don't want to vary. They're ones you don't want to set a precedent on. We have the most recent development application that I can recall where we did allow a setback relaxation, didn't have those two issues. That was in Sunshine Beach, if you recall, a deck that extended it to a location somewhat less than what the existing building did. So to me, that's one that I do have a look at in the context of the site, but this whole thing of, but to get to that, you've had to push your boundaries in terms of gross floor area. That's an unacceptable level of variation for me, and one that if it was approved would accept an unacceptable precedent that would lead to bigger and bigger houses on smaller and smaller lots.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Anyone else like to speak to this? We'll put the Councillor Stockwell judge close.
Now, I think all the arguments have been very
If you do say so yourself. We'll put it to a vote. All in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Kerry. There are no confidential items. There are no submissions to public question time. The next meeting is on the 19th of May 2022. I declare the meeting closed at 8:18.